I would like to call this Committee of the Whole meeting of September 16th, 2024 to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lynn Timmers, Counselor and Chair of the General Business and Finance Committee. I'd like to begin by reading a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given. And if assistance is required, please see the clerk. Once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of Town Hall. Further, please ensure your cell phones are on silent or turned off. And lastly, the Town of Lincoln Committee of the Whole meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. Closed captioning is available on all our videos by selecting the closed captioning button on the bottom right of the video. Members of committee are in attendance with regrets from Councillor Murray. We have staff in attendance in person and remotely. Also in attendance this evening, we have a representative from BMA Management Consulting Inc., CHC Limited, the Ministry of Transportation, and Niagara Regional Police. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none. Do members have any amendments to the order of the agenda? I'm seeing none. We have no statutory public meetings this evening, and we will now consider the consent agenda inclusive of Housing Select Committee minutes of June 11th, 2024, Museum Advisory Committee minutes of June 27th, 2024, Heritage Advisory Committee minutes of July 11th, and Special Heritage Advisory Committee minutes of August 22nd, 2024. Would any member of the committee like to remove an item from the consent agenda to discuss? I'm seeing none. There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Mikulik that all items listed under the heading of consent agenda for Monday, September 16th, 2024 be adopted as recommended. Housing Select Committee minutes of June 11th, 2024, Museum Advisory Committee minutes of June 27th, Heritage Advisory Committee minutes of July 11th, and Special Heritage Advisory Committee minutes of August 22nd, 24. I'll now ask the clerk to please open the vote.
The vote is now open. I've closed the vote, and that carries.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. We will now begin the General Business and Finance Committee agenda. We have no registered delegations for the General Business and Finance Committee this evening. Under reports, we will now consider item 7.2.1 Report FN-12-24 regarding the Water and Sanitary Sewer Financial Plan and Rate Study. Our Manager of Finance Deputy Treasurer will provide opening remarks. Kate, please go ahead.
Good evening, council members, and thank you for your consideration of Report FN 12-24. This report presents our Water and Sanitary Financial Plan and Rate Study for your consideration and approval. Our staff, in collaboration with BMA Management Consulting, have diligently prepared these plans and studies using the latest operational and capital forecasts to ensure accuracy and relevance. As per your direction, we have undertaken several key initiatives, including a comprehensive 10-year capital remapping, an updated development charges background study, and various grant applications. I'm pleased to report that these efforts have led to a reduction in the forecasted rate increases compared to our previous study. This updated forecast incorporates anticipated costs from the region of Niagara, which remains our largest expense for water and wastewater services and will need to be reflected in our rates. In addition to these updates, the Financial Plan and Rate Study offer a comparative analysis of our service costs with other municipalities in Niagara. The findings indicate that Lincoln's charges, as a percentage of household income, are below the regional average, demonstrating our commitment to maintaining affordability for our residents. By approving the water system financial plan, you will also fulfill the legislative requirements related to our municipal drinking water system license. The concurrent preparation of the sanitary sewer system financial plan and rate study ensures transparency and sustainability for both systems, providing a balanced approach to rate setting that considers both affordability and their long-term viability. Thank you for your attention to this important matter. We look forward to your questions and discussion.
Thank you very much, Kate. So we have Jim, sorry if I pronounce your name incorrectly, Bruzies, from BMA Management Consultant, Inc., in attendance to provide a presentation. Prior to the presentation, I will ask that committee proceed with a majority of vote to request an extension for the presentation until completion. By a show of hands? Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of council. It's okay. Yeah, thank you very much. As Kate mentioned, the Ministry of the Environment, under the Safe Drinking Act 2002, requires municipalities to update the water financial plan with its application for renewal, which takes place every 5 years. The town of Lincoln has taken a proactive, integrated approach. The financial plan that has been prepared includes both water and sanitary sewer. Sanitary sewer is not a requirement under the Act, but it was included in this study, and that was to ensure financial sustainability of the entire system. The plan, in accordance with regulations, covers a 6-year period. We're looking at 2025 to 2030. And just a cautionary note, the plan is based on assumptions, of course, and over the course of the next 5 years, some of the assumptions may change that we've incorporated in the projection, and the province recognizes that. So therefore, the financial plan is not binding on council. However, it does provide a strategy for long-term financial sustainability and a framework for guiding future operating and capital budgets. So the financial plan that has been prepared includes forecasts for water consumption over the period. And again, it's an assumption, and the consumption could change, which has an effect on rates. We included the funding for all of the capital projects that are in your current capital plan. We indexed operating cost increases based on inflation and other known operating cost increases that we were aware of. For example, the region's forecast in their operating costs and known future events. So again, although great efforts have been made to present accurate financial projections, it's considered a living document. And again, based on the assumptions that are built into it, they could change, which requires continuous improvement. And so comparing the actual results with the projections can lead to improved future planning. So the guiding principles that we undertook in the preparation of the water and wastewater financial plan included, we wanted a smooth rate increase over the period. I think the last thing that ratepayers want to see is tremendous bumps and then decreases in rates over the period. We wanted to ensure a fair sharing in the distribution of resources between current and future ratepayers. We wanted to make sure that the current ratepayers contribute adequately for the future replacement of the capital assets based on what they've consumed. We wanted to ensure that growth pays for growth. So we wanted to build into the plan sustainable cash flows. There was a requirement because of the capital budget and the amount of reserves that are available to issue debt. So we used the debt to smooth out the funding requirements for some of the large system improvements. We wanted to maintain programs and services that meet or exceed environmental protection standards, and then maintain affordable water and wastewater rates over the period. So some of the challenges that we saw in the preparation of the financial plan, first of all, your system is complex and quite costly. The replacement value for water is about, according to the asset management plan, which was done in 2022, I believe, was $283 million. And in terms of sanitary sewer, the replacement value is $219 million. So again, quite expensive capital requirements for both water and wastewater, which we wanted to make sure that we build a plan to have adequate capital contributions. There is an annual infrastructure gap. In the case of water, it's about $900,000 a year. In sanitary sewer, it's about $2.4 million a year. And what I mean by the infrastructure gap, it's a difference between what the asset management plan recommends that should be the annual contribution, and in comparison to the actual budget for water and wastewater. So again, there's an annual infrastructure gap. So one of the intents of the plan, obviously, is to make sure that we gradually close that infrastructure gap. There is a low level of capital reserves relative to the capital spending requirements. And again, to address that situation, there was early in the forecast, there's a need to issue debentures. Capital operating costs in water and wastewater operations are increasing faster than inflation. And in fact, the biggest part of your both water and wastewater budgets is the region charges, and they're projecting more than inflationary increases. And then again, we want to continue to maintain ratepayer affordability. So in terms of ratepayer affordability, something that Kate alluded to, one of the metrics that is commonly used is looking at average household income and then comparing the average water and wastewater costs. In your case, it's about 175 cubic meters a year, and a percentage of that water and wastewater as a percentage of the average household income. So we looked at the Niagara average of all the municipalities, and they're at about 1.2% of water and wastewater costs as a percentage of average household income. In the case of Lincoln, you're at 1%. So you're in terms of affordability, you're in a better situation than the average of the Niagara municipalities. One of the other big things that we looked at is, and Kate mentioned that the capital budget was reviewed extensively in detail, and the total replacement costs over the next 10 years, based on the most current capital budget, is about $10.9 million. So you can see it's quite significant. And that $10.9 million is to be funded from rates. So the strategy that we've employed is to gradually increase the reserve contributions to match the funding requirements. As I said, the current reserve contributions are less than the annual replacement cost requirements. So to do that in 1 year, it's quite an extensive increase. And in terms of affordability for the ratepayers, it be unaffordable to do it in 1 year. So our plan is to gradually phase that reserve contribution over the life of the plan. Sanitary sewer capital budget, again, quite extensive. The cost to be funded from rates is about $8.6 million over the 6-year period. So reserves are important in terms of financial planning. They provide rate stabilization. They provide financing for one-term or short-term requirements. They're used to make provisions for the replacement of assets that are currently being consumed. They also used to avoid spikes in funding requirements for large capital projects. And they also are used to ensure adequate and sustainable cash flows. So over the plan, when we look at the water and sewer reserves, the capital reserve contributions, in the case of water, they increased from 2.9 million in 2025 to 4.1 million in 2030. So you can see the red line. The red line is the targeted contribution in accordance with the asset management plan. And as I said, you have currently an infrastructure gap. So the intent of this plan is to gradually bring the reserve reserve contributions up to the requirements. And we anticipate that would happen in probably about 8 or 9 years in the case of water. And the same thing in wastewater. The existing infrastructure gap is more significant. So the increases you'll see in the rates for wastewater are higher than the water increases. And the capital contributions, they increased from 700,000 in 2025 to 2.1 million in 2030. So debt, as I mentioned, there was a requirement early in the forecast to issue some debt for some large projects. It's a fundamental component to well-developed and credible financial plan. One of the metrics leading practices is that debt service costs do not exceed 10% of own source revenues. And in the case of the water and wastewater debt charges as a percentage of own source revenue, the sanitary sewer is at 6%, and that gradually decreases over the course because there's no further debt after the first year, and that gradually increases to about 4%. In the case of water, the percentage is 2% at the end of the forecast period. And when we combine the two together, you're well within that 10%. It peaks out at 4%. So what is the impact on the residentials? As I said, the average residential consumer is about 175 cubic meters a year, and they have a 5/8-inch meter. So in 2025, based on the plan, we anticipate about an 8.7% increase, which translates to about $120 or $10 a month. And then you can see the increases from 26 to 30, this is the blended increase, by the way, between 7.5% and 7.2%. So it's just over $100 in each of the years. So just to summarize, the financial plan ensures a reasonable degree of stability and predictability in the rate burden while supporting affordability. We've smoothed the rate increases throughout the period. The rate burden is under 1.5% of the average household income. It supports a fair sharing in the distribution of resources between current and future ratepayers. It provides a sustainable level of revenue for future rehabilitation and replacement needs. And as I say, the plan entails a gradual increase in the reserve contributions. It maximizes financial flexibility, and what I mean by that is the reserves are forecast to increase, which provides that flexibility, and the debt charges are projected to decrease, which provides additional flexibility. And maintains programs and services that meet or exceed environmental protection standards. And that's the end of the presentation.
Good, thank you very much. Do members of committee have any questions? Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Jim. Thank you very much for the presentation. On page 14, where you mentioned I'm not sure if the clerk can bring up the presentation again, the ratepayer affordability. How much stock goes into that calculation in order to make the decisions?
It's a standard practice. Obviously, when you're looking at affordability, we're looking at averages, and of course, there's ratepayers that are below the average in terms of household income. And then there's also ratepayers above the average. So it is the most widely used metric that's out there. And in terms of affordability, it's recommended that rates, water and wastewater rates, should be less than 3% of average household income, and you're less than the 1.5%.
Okay, follow-up, Madam Chair? So with that in mind, how do they ever look at the actual cost of living in those areas? And I'm thinking in particular, I know, again, it gets very complicated the more you start dissecting and going into it, but if you're comparing us to, say, Port Colborne, if the cost to purchase a home here is $900,000 and the cost to purchase a home there is $500,000, again, there's a huge difference in affordability and actual disposable income in those areas. And when you compare that, what would the calculation look like?
Yeah, we don't have that comparison, but you're right. There is a number of factors in terms of affordability, and the average price of a house. We've got a database in our office, and the average price of a house, a similar house in Port Colborne and Welland, I believe, in comparison to Lincoln, it's less. So there's a bunch of variables when you're looking at affordability in terms of municipal taxes and rates that would enter into the equation. So you'd have to look at the combined. As I say, we do have a database in the town of, well, the region of Niagara is a participant, and all of the local municipalities from the region we've got in our database. And so when I look at the total taxes and the water and sewer rates as a percentage of average household income, I don't have the exact figure here, but they are in Lincoln. You're less than the average of I won't say all, but the majority of the Niagara municipalities.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. And just to follow up, again, it's one of those things where I know when we look at, again, general affordability, I have an issue with this as a justification. Like, I understand the need of why we need to invest going forward. It's just using this as a justification when you have a conversation with a resident and you start like going into those other layers of affordability. Again, the numbers here, they kind of get washed aside, and you really kind of have to look at like disposable income, which again, that's not something that we can really get because privately we don't know how much debt people have, and again, the actual cost that they have for overhead. But it's just one of those things where when I look at this, again, it's not something that gives me a nice warm feeling to say that we're in a good spot, but regardless, I know that we still have to move forward and make some adjustments. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next, we have Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you, Chair Timmer, through you to the
Oh,
presenter.
one sec.
Oh, okay, thank you, sorry about that. Thank you, through you to the presenter. Same line, same page as Councillor Russell when we're talking about affordability, and I just, where are those numbers extrapolated? The average household income, 134,846. Where do we get that data?
There's a firm that we use to calculate those figures for us. It's data mining. It's called data mining. And they do a lot of these calculations for a number of different municipalities. And they're using Stats Canada, and they have a very extensive database. I'm not sure of all the variables that are included, but as I say, it's very, very extensive, and they do a detailed calculation. So it's from data mining. It's another external source.
Thank you. I asked that question because I know I've received, phone calls, from Statistics Can, and I'm just curious if people are actually being truthful with what they're earning. I don't know if anyone out there is proud to be making less than what they're actually making, and if they're really making 40,000, are they actually lying and saying they make 60,000? So I worry about the accuracy of those numbers as far as what people are actually earning based on that sort of consumer-provided data. So that's a concern I have. And then another question I have through you, Chair, is that before or after tax? That
That's-
134,000, is
that's
that
gross.
before income tax or after income tax?
Gross
That's
income.
gross, okay.
Correct. And the, one of the components of the calculation that data mining uses is a sample of income tax returns from the municipalities.
Okay. So that's something I keep in mind when, I look at a bill and it's going to be 1,300. I struggle with this concept of, well, it's affordable, so we can charge more, or we can, the consumer in Lincoln can tolerate a higher bill because they can afford to. So that concerns me a bit, like that approach. Another question, if I may?
Yep, one more.
This is my last one. Page 11, percentage of own source revenue. It's mentioned that it's 6%. 6% of own source revenue. Is that just on the water side, or is that on the overall side of?
Is that the debt that you're referring to?
Yeah, the debt strategy, debt charges as a percentage of own source revenues.
That,
10%, sorry. Recommend debt servicing not exceed 10% of own source. Is that just on water and wastewater, or is that overall?
no, that's just water and wastewater. And just to clarify as well, it doesn't include the development charges.
Okay, so that own source revenue does not,
It's just the amount that's to be paid back from rates, water rates. and
from the rate,
That's correct.
from the ratepayer themselves,
That's
the
correct.
current ratepayer. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Counselor Bernay.
Thank you, Chair Timmers. Through you to the presenter. Jim, thanks for the presentation. I'm just wondering, just to kind of set the record straight, have you ever worked for the town of Lincoln before? You done work for the town of Lincoln?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Yeah, you do work typically across other municipalities in the region of Niagara?
Yes, we work for, we've been in business for 25 years. We've worked for every one of the Niagara municipalities in some capacity,
Great.
and the region as well.
Great. So I'm just, when I look at, your one slide that talks about, how did you word it? Sorry, let me get to this. Guiding principles. So we talk about, we talk about this all the time, that growth pays for growth. So one could argue that we've had unprecedented growth here in Lincoln over the last 5 to 7 years, albeit this year with debt and everything, and we don't have too many shovels in the ground. But when you look at our numbers and you look at our system with about, 283 and 219, so about $500 million, you think that is, from your expertise being in the business, you think that's fairly in line with a municipality of our size?
The amount of the assets?
Yeah.
For the, one of the anomalies in the region is that you're only responsible for the distribution, and most other municipalities are single tier, or the regions don't have water and wastewater, and the municipality is responsible for the upper and lower tier. So it's from that comparison perspective, it's a little difficult to say if you're high or low. But I would say one of the big factors, because you're just responsible for the distribution, is the land area that you're serving. And so whatever the land area of the other municipalities are, there's a relationship to that. It's the urban area as well.
Right. Appreciate
Where
that.
you're supplying water and wastewater.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jim. So through you, Chair, just a follow-up question. So you, during your presentation, you mentioned that we have chosen to look at not only water, but look at the sanitary. Is that something that most municipalities are choosing to do, or are they choosing to look at them at different times?
Yeah, we've done quite a few studies across the province, and all of the studies that we've undertaken, probably about 50, they've all included water and wastewater.
Tackle them both at the same time?
That's correct.
Right. And through you, Chair, just last question. So when you sit down with our staff, which I'm sure you have been doing, and you look at our capital reserves, and you made a comment about that in your presentation at the levels they're at, is there any red flags that are going up with you that you're having discussions with our staff that should be concerning?
In discussions with the staff are in line with our findings, and we're on the same page in that regard. You have a lot of capital replacement costs, and you've got an existing infrastructure gap, which means that past ratepayers weren't contributing their fair share, so it has to be gradually made up. And in addition to that, you have an annual infrastructure gap. So as a result of all of that and the capital requirements over the next 6 years, your starting position in the reserves is not adequate. Therefore, we had to issue some debt at the beginning. But as I said, it is building up, and the reserves are becoming more sustainable.
Right. Appreciate those comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Russell, you're up again. Something new, new question?
Yes, Madam Chair, just a clarification. Can I ask a question to the treasurer about the report?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll allow that.
Okay, then through you to our treasurer. Again, I'm not sure if Dustin can bring up page 14 of Appendix B, where it shows the ratepayer page 12 of 25 of Appendix B, where it shows the ratepayer impact. Obviously, it shows that we're going to be going from an average of $1,376 for water and wastewater for 2024 up to $2,125 in 2030, which is quite dramatic. Are we going to be, through you to the treasurer, be offsetting some of these with some capital reduction costs in terms of projects being done in those years around the municipality that do not involve water and wastewater?
Okay, thank you. Who's going to take that? Is that going, Charlotte? Director Tunakaitis, please?
Yes, through you, Chair, to the councillor. I'm just going to ask a clarifying question because I was trying to look for the page while you were talking. So you're talking about the increases that are forecast in the rates over the 6-year period, and whether because of that capital infrastructure, we're planning to alter the levels of capital investment in other areas, like you're talking DCs and tax levy?
Through you, Madam Chair, just to clarify, more or less in terms of the number of projects that we'd be doing in those years that do not involve water and wastewater. Like, because this increase is going to be so dramatic and the impact is going to be on the taxpayer, are we going to try to maybe do less roads in those years, or maybe remove some of the park plans that we're going to be doing in those years to try to offset that burden that we're going to be placing on the residents? It's more of a strategic question as opposed to an operational one.
I'm not really sure how that relates, like you're kind of going off on a whole different, those kinds of decisions are not something that the director can really comment on. I'm not sure if our CAO is looking to comment there.
I can add a little
Okay,
bit
let
through
you
you,
add.
Chair.
Okay, all right.
I would say we are looking at the plan. So when we did that 10-year remapping, we are looking at the total investment each year, what's required. We're looking at the debt levels each year. So I would say similar to the way that BMA has prepared this report and tied in the water and sanitary sewer systems, then what we're working on for the town as a whole is looking at all of the projects, levy-supported DC, along with the water and sanitary sewer, and trying to make sure that those things are balanced. But I would say on the levy side, similar to the water and sewer side, there is also an infrastructure gap there. We've been talking about it, so there will be a need to address that over time as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, I think you answered that very well, Director Tunakaitis. I think that's what you were looking for? Okay, very good. All right. I see Councillor Mikulik in the queue.
Thank you very much, Chair Timmers. Through you to presenter again. On that same chart, it says blended percentage increase from prior year and basically for future years. Is that blended with the region increase as well, or what is that blended? Blended of what?
Both water and wastewater together.
Okay, so that's just on the town portion?
That's
Of
correct.
the bill and not the blended between the town increase and the region increase?
That's correct, just the town portion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mary Stin? Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thanks very much for your report. We just finished last week with the approval of the capital equipment at the region, and so this is a good time to receive this report when you see the rates that are going to be coming forward. No surprises. We're all the subject of our lack of investment in our infrastructure across the board. I'm interested in the strategy that's being used for Camden, which was area rated when their water system was implemented. And I was pleased to see that there's more equity through this project. And Madam Chair, Mr. Graham may have the background, more of the background information on this question, because I understand that those rates, that special rating was removed a number of years ago. And so that would be my question for Mr. Graham. And for this gentleman, it would be specifically, what is their rate going to look like under this new regime?
Okay, did you want to comment, or you were looking to Director Graham first?
Yes.
Director Graham? Okay. We'll go over to Director Graham.
Thank you, Madam Chair, to the Mayor. So the special rate that was mentioned is no longer charged to the residents of Camden. That was in relation to when the new wastewater system got installed, and that was to pay that off, so that no longer is in effect with this new study.
And when did that happen, Madam Chair, through you?
Through Madam Chair to the Mayor, I believe it was around 2018 in that timeline, somewhere in there. I don't have the exact date, but
Okay, that's good enough. All right, great. So how is their rate, through you, Madam Chair, how is the Camden rate assessed? Is it the same as anyone else that is part of the across-town system? The rates are calculated the same?
Yeah, the situation in Camden is kind of unique in the sense that it's sanitary sewer only. Very, very few areas have sanitary sewer only. As a result of only having sanitary sewer, there is no water meter to measure the consumption. So what looking at last year's Camden rate, what we did is we imputed the amount of sanitary sewer that they'd be paying for in comparison to the rest of the town. And it worked out to that they were essentially paying around 230 cubic meters. And I think that base was set a number of years ago. And then since then, what's been happening in the trend in water and wastewater, in water in particular, the consumption has been going down. There's more efficient fixtures, lot sizes are decreasing, that type of thing. So the average consumption has decreased townwide, but that in the last year's rates for Camden, that wasn't reflected. So what we did this year is we reflected the increase is only approximately half the increase of the wastewater rates of the regular users. And we've reduced the imputed consumption from around 230 to 222, I believe it is. So it's getting more in line with the rest of the ratepayers in the town.
And so if everybody else is 174, why would they not be
The
174?
problem is that there is no meters, there is nothing to measure. And the average, and also the median is about 175. So what that means is half the people are regular ratepayers are more than the 175, and half are less. So how you want to determine the rate for Camden? It's well, I'll be frank, it's arbitrary in the sense that there is no meter to measure. And so that's, but we recognize that consumption is decreasing, so we reflected that. That's why the increase in Camden is only half the regular increase in the rest of the town.
Well, it's going in the right direction. So, Madam Chair, I want to speak to Director Graham about how it is that we were able to do a report in this manner as opposed to the traditional method that we were using. And this has to do with our success with I&I. And so I just want Mr. Graham to speak briefly about that as a reinforcement for all of us and the community about the effort that's gone into preparing for being in this position. Because no matter how we cut it, this is a very expensive, maintaining these systems are very, very expensive, and we can't afford not to have a plan to do it well. But there's other technologies and there's other improvements to the system that Lincoln has undertaken, and I would like Mr. Graham to speak, if you don't mind, about that, because it's integral to what we're doing here.
Absolutely. I think it is important to bring that up and give some details around it. So to you, Director Graham.
Through you, Madam Chair, and great question, Mayor Easton. So what Mayor Easton was referring to is the town's inflow and infiltration reduction program that the town's been investing in over the last number of years. And really the objective of that program is we're trying to identify and remove additional water that's getting into our wastewater system, such as groundwater, rainwater, et cetera, because we have to treat all that water, and there's a cost to treat all that additional water. So the more of that unwanted water that we can remove from our system, it saves on treatment costs. And at the same time, what we've been trying to do is do a lot of rehabilitation work on our sewer system, our sanitary sewer system that collects the wastewater from residents. Where you have a leaky sewer or deficient sewer, down the road that gets a lot more expensive if we ignore it and let it go. It can turn into a very large capital replacement cost. So we've been doing a lot of innovative trenchless technology work to reline pipes, seal pipes up, basically make them more watertight, and we can extend the life of those pipes. And as a result, we can push out, large capital investments, and at the same time, we can look at reducing our operating costs that go along with maintaining a wastewater system that ultimately affects our rates. So the more we can do to reduce that, we can, help minimize our rate increases.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director Graham, and thank you, Mayor Easton. Next in the queue, I have Councillor.
Thanks, Chair Timmers. And thank you very much, Jim, for the report. Question 2, about water main breaks. So that's water loss, right? And you end up paying for that,
Correct.
correct? So, we undertook a very aggressive stance a number of years ago to replace cast iron pipes in our system. We've eliminated that. We're now going down the route of doing the cement-lined ones. So techniques like that help control your cost of water, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And a question too I was searching because I read it and I underlined it. There's various volumetric rate studies that you can do on how you pay for it. We've chosen the uniform rate, much like 70% of municipalities in Ontario. There's a humpback rate, there's a declining rate, there's an inclining rate. In your professional opinion, best one to manage water wastewater costs across the municipality?
Yeah, first of all, in setting the rate structure, municipality would establish goals and objectives, things like what do they want to see, more conservation, economic development, which means that they would charge less for high consumption users, that type of thing. Based on what I've seen here, you don't have a big problem with conservation, and so there's no need to have a conservation rate. So I think that we looked at the various humpbacks and declining rate structure and inclining rate structure, and I think for the municipality at this time, the uniform rate is, the two-part uniform rate is the best way to go.
Okay.
The other thing too is when you're changing rate structure, it has an impact on certain elements of the community, and most of the rate structures that we looked at would have a detrimental impact to the low volume users in the town.
Mm-hmm.
So we are recommending the two-part rate structure.
Yeah, so through
With a
your
uniform rate.
Yeah, through your chair terms. So the current structure we use is you pay for what you use.
That's correct.
And the main issue is the fixed costs have been increasing exponentially from what we get from the region, and that's why we're playing catch-up.
Yes, what we built into the forecast is an
Yeah.
increase to the fixed as well.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Timmons.
You're welcome. Okay, Councillor Russell,
One
one
more
more
quick-
question.
one more.
Make it quick.
One quick one, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Jim, on page 12 of the Appendix A, where it shows the historical rates for fixed water charges and the different levels of piping and the charges associated with them. One question I had a couple years ago that I didn't really get a great answer on, or for a condo that let's say there's 400 units in there, and I don't know what size pipe a condo would use. I don't know if they use a 6-inch pipe, if it's that big, but let's just say it's 6 inches. Here, it says that they would pay $592 quarterly for their water charge for the building, which if there's 600 units there, they're paying less than $1 per unit per quarter, where a house next door is paying $33 for that fixed-based quarterly charge. Are those numbers, as we start getting more condos and more build-outs here, should we start looking at that to make sure that it reflects the number of units in the buildings in order to try to offset some of these costs and not put the burden so much on the individual households?
Through you, there's standards for the different size pipes, and they're set by the American and Canadian Waterworks Association. And what they do is they do a study, and it's updated periodically. And based on the pipe size and the replacement costs that go into that, they have recommended ratios. The 5/8 inch is deemed to be 1, and then from there, the ratio increases as the pipe size increases. Some of your ratios, when you get into the larger size pipes, I think they should be looked at again, just to make sure that they are in line with the AWWA standards.
Do we have an opportunity ourselves to adjust those numbers, or does it have to follow the standards by those two associations?
No, the municipalities have the flexibility to.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good question, Councillor. Okay, thank you very much, Jim.
Thank
I'm
you.
not going to attempt your last name again.
You did,
Can you say it
Well,
for me? So, what
pardon?
is your last name?
Berzies.
Oh, I
You were right up.
I didn't do too bad. Well, thank you very much for the presentation and for being here this evening. And I have a motion. There being no further discussion, a motion moved by Councillor Reimer. The committee receive and file report FN 1224 regarding the water and sanitary sewer financial plan and rate study and approve the water and sanitary sewer financial plan and rate study in Appendix A. I'll now ask our clerk to please open the vote.
The vote is open. And I will close the vote, and that carries.
Okay, thank you very much. So I am now going to ask, excuse me, Councillor Rajima, if you could please take the chair for this next item that I'm going to speak to. Should I read the next item?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, okay. So we will now consider item 7.2.2 being an age-friendly and active community advisory committee member update. And I've asked Councillor Rajima to take the chair so that I can speak to this item. So I will be stepping down due to other commitments that conflict. And I would like to thank everyone that I had the opportunity to work with on this committee for the past number of years. I also would like to put forward that I believe this committee is very well served with one councillor, who is Councillor Pachariva, and I am recommending that we continue on with one representative, one councillor. We do have other committees that are that structure. We have only one councillor on library, BIA, JAC, chamber. So, we're kind of split. So those are my comments, and thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Timmers. Are there any questions or comments to Councillor Timmers' announcement? Councillor Mikulik, is you're showing up.
Oh, there you go. Through you, would it be possible to ask Councillor Pachariva his thoughts on that? Sitting on this committee currently, if he feels that one councillor is sufficient?
Yeah, I think that's fine, Councillor McCulloch.
Thank you very much.
You've been taken out of the queue there, Vice Chair. So, Madam Mayor?
I want to thank Councillor Timmers for her length of service on this committee. I think it's been almost the entire time you've been on council. So this would be 10 years.
Mary Easton, it was when we began Age Friendly, my second
Okay.
term, so 2018.
2018.
We started Age Friendly.
Okay. Well, it was a brand-new committee and a brand-new concept at that time, so I think it's very important to have had your perspective. And I'm personally quite happy if Councillor Pachariva wants to continue on, because I believe he has also been on since its inception for active transportation. So I'm certainly willing to support that, Madam Clerk, but we'll follow whatever process you've got up, you have ready to go. Thank you very much.
Okay, I don't see any more questions or comments. So again, thank you, Councillor Timmers, for your service. And is this something that we have to vote on? Okay.
Thanks, Vice Chair. So I'm going to throw a motion up on the screen, and it's been moved by Councillor Timmers, and I'll read it. That committee approved that there be one council representative on the Age Friendly and Active Community Advisory Committee for the remainder of the councillor term, and I will put that to a vote. Do you see? Yep, it's on there, right? And I will open. Okay. Are you stuck?
Yeah.
You are? And what's your?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And I will close the vote. And that carries. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll turn the chair back over to Chair Timmers.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Councilor Rajima. As there are no further reports for the General Business and Finance Committee agenda this evening, we have now concluded the General Business and Finance Committee agenda. I will now ask the clerk to transition to our next committee. Thank you, everyone.
We will now begin the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee agenda. 8.1, we have no delegations this evening. 8.2, reports. We will now consider Report PW 0824, the Truck Bypass Camera Monitoring Pilot Project Update. The Director of Public Works will be providing a presentation, and we have Staff Sergeant Sarah Rose from the Niagara Regional Police, as well as Rob Kane and Rob Morningstar from the Ministry of Transportation in attendance to assist with any questions. Prior to the presentation, I will ask that committee proceed with a majority vote to request an extension for the presentation until completion. Councillor Timmers? Thank you very much. Director Graham, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank Mayor Easton and members of council this evening for giving us an opportunity to provide an update on the 2024 Truck Bypass Camera Monitoring Pilot Project. We want to provide an update here this evening. So this pilot project has a strong alignment to council's strategic priorities. When you look at promoting a health and safe community, and within that, we're looking at implementing road safety initiatives. And again, this pilot program with our truck safety blitzes and enforcement initiatives strongly aligns to that. So how we got here. Started back in 2019, council passed a resolution regarding truck safety in Lincoln. And one of the main objectives at that time was to undertake scale inspection, station avoidance, and enforcement blitzes. So just a real quick review here. Scale inspection, station avoidance. So we have the Vineland Truck Inspection Station located on the QEW between Vineland and Beansville and operates in the westbound direction for the QEW traffic. Trucks are obligated to turn in and undergo a vehicle inspection if required when the station is open. However, a portion of truck drivers avoid the inspection station by exiting the QEW in advance and then bypassing around on regional and town roads. Drivers avoid the inspection station to save time on their route. They may have known issues with their licensing or vehicle defects, and they don't want officers to discover those during an inspection. Frequent truck safety blitzes. So in response, the town has built a strong partnership with MTO and the Niagara Regional Police to complete frequent truck safety blitzes. And all those focus on the scale avoidance and the bypass truck traffic. If you look at the graph to the right-hand side of the screen there, this really demonstrates the progress that we've made in this area. And I think it's really something to be proud of when you look back at 2019, when we first started, we were starting with one inspection or one blitz, and now we're up to 12 when we look at this year. And, I'd really like to thank our partners sitting here behind me this evening from NRPS and MTO for all their support with these blitzes. A lot of work and organization goes into this, and we really appreciate the support on these. The camera monitoring pilot project. So this project, or this pilot project, utilizes a smart surveillance AI technology. It automatically sends the MTO officers a notification that the same truck has been detected on more than one camera, again flagging that truck as a potential bypasser. It also captures truck images, showing a lot of information, has a license plate reader, which is very valuable to the enforcement teams. And the town is able to collect truck volume data to help gain a better understanding of what this traffic situation looks like. The MTO enforcement plan. So based on the camera images of the commercial vehicle, company logo, license plate reader information, that officer, reviewing this gets a lot of valuable information, trying to decide, is this more of a local company, a truck doing local business, which we totally, want to support and promote, or is this a truck that, really shouldn't be in our area? Is it coming from the U.S. going to the GTA direction, and why is it on our roads? If the MTO officer suspects that after pulling the truck over and having a conversation with that driver, if they suspect that this truck is bypassing, they will escort that truck all the way back to the inspection station for a thorough examination, where fines and charges could be laid. So this graph here is showing some pretty interesting data that we've been able to collect this year, starting in January, going into the summer. So this represents the average daily truck traffic on King Street, west of Victoria Avenue. So this would be truck traffic coming towards the Beansville direction. So the blue line or the blue area on the graph represents sort of your baseline truck traffic. And it's an average per day. Then that orange area on top of the blue area is representing the increase in truck traffic when the inspection station is in operation. So leading us to believe that, that's a representation of trucks bypassing, so the increase in traffic. So on an average, we're looking at about a 27% increase when the station is open, where we see that truck volume increase. And just to kind of give some context around that percentage, it's around 55, 56 trucks per day on an average. We also had similar results last year when we looked at this, so we're starting to build kind of a trend in this area, but again, we'll talk about that a little bit further. A little more data to share on Green Lane. So we're also monitoring Green Lane west of Victoria Avenue, because we know that is another potential bypass route to head east-west in the community. Again, what we're seeing there is that blue line is your average truck traffic per day. And then the orange is that increase that we're starting to monitor and collect data on when the scales are in operation. So we're seeing about a 33% increase in traffic when that happens. And again, we collected data last year, and it's similar results. And that 33% is representing about, I think we were estimating around 14 trucks per day that we're seeing an increase on. So next steps, we definitely want to continue to collect more data to gain a better understanding of truck patterns and trends throughout the year regarding the Vineland Truck Inspection Station avoidance situation. And also continue to collaborate and work together with MTO and the Niagara Regional Police to focus on commercial vehicles avoiding the Vineland Truck Inspection Station. So with that, I'm here and our partners are here this evening to answer any questions council may have. And thank you again for giving us the opportunity to provide this update this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Graham. Do members of council have any questions? Councilor Rinjema, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Director Graham. About 6 weeks ago, you took us out for a tour, Councillor Timmers and I, and we went around the route and we saw exactly how the station operates and how the cameras are monitored and how the whole process goes, and it was really interesting and really helped a lot, helped me understand exactly how it all takes place, and it's fascinating. And so my question is about the trucks that are traveling along Green Lane in that second graph that you showed us. Do we know if they're going along Green Lane and then traveling south on Bartlett and then west again along Green Lane to Ontario generally? Or do you think, or do we know, are they going along Green Lane and turning north on Bartlett to go to the service road?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, I'm pretty sure that's what they would do. I mean, I don't know if MTO has any comments from what they observed, but yeah, they would take Green Lane all the way to Bartlett, then hang a right and get to the service road. And because if they're trying to get back to the QEW, that would be their shortest route versus heading south and then north again on Ontario.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so it's just helping me understand the impact from, I'm glad that you're monitoring that. I'm glad that's being monitored, because I remember somebody bringing that up at the very beginning of all of this, that they're seeing unnecessary truck traffic along Green Lane. Thank you.
Councilor Russer, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Dave and to our guests. I had the privilege of going out on Friday and having a tour and having a ride along, and it was amazing. So I want to thank, again, everybody in attendance today for showing me around and giving me some insights. But I also, and I asked this, I think the last update as well, if we were to go one step further and, again, adjust the program and expand by a camera, if possible, would it be something that would be positive? Like if we were to go up to like Mudd and Victoria to see like how big of a net are we casting? Are they going along like up Victoria even further because they know that if they go on Highway 8 they're going to get hit with the camera? And I asked this to Nick during the ride along, would it be something that maybe we look at something at Highway 8 in Ontario where they might be coming back down? I'm just wondering like how we can, again, make sure that net is as efficient as possible, and we're trying to catch as many scofflaws, to use Councillor Patrick-Reeves' term, as well as we can.
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor, yeah, a great question. We definitely want to work with our partners here and getting their input and thoughts. If we do want to expand, where would be, some of their thoughts? I don't know. Does you guys have any comments on that?
Well, we can say that the cameras work as an officer for us because we're limited in staff, and we patrol the entire Hamilton and Niagara region. So our manpower is low. The manpower we put in the Lincoln's unprecedented. It's something that we're working with you guys on. But the cameras help because that gives us an extra set of eyes, which means I don't have to have an officer positioned in those spots, right? We can use the cameras as an eye, and then we have one officer that can go intercept. So the more cameras, the better for us.
So follow-up, Mr. Chair, do you think what we have now is sufficient to, again, cast the net as efficiently as possible? Or would you, if you had a magic wand, recommend expanding it to make sure that if they're getting wise to the routes right now, are they going beyond those routes and skirting the cameras?
Yeah, so what we found is when we put the first camera in, they moved back to Jordan Road. And then we started catching, we had the camera installed on Highway 8. Now they're starting to realize that they're getting stopped when they get off Jordan Road. So we know that they're paying attention to us being able to catch them, and they're not sure why that's happening. We did have one incident where they turned the camera off on us, but, so yeah, I mean, the more cameras, the better. We know that they're figuring out, okay, they get off Victoria Avenue, they're gonna get stopped, they get off Jordan Road, they're gonna get stopped. So we know that they're finding other ways around us. Your graph shows truck traffic goes up when we're open. Just makes sense, right? But,
Yeah.
yeah, the more cameras, the better for us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Michalak, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair Brunei, through our guests here. In particular, I just want to say thank you for everything you do. You are noticed and you are seen in the community. With respect to the camera that is on the east side of Victoria Avenue on King Street, do we have any data on the numbers that avoid Victoria Avenue and use Jordan Road as opposed to Victoria Avenue?
I think we raised that question with town staff before this meeting, and I think it's too new to have any definitive answers on that.
Pardon me, sorry?
It's too new, like, there's
Oh,
not
okay, so
enough
we don't-
data yet to
Okay,
determine that.
okay. I just, I think it's incredibly important, like, you know, whenever we see MTO officers, their trucks, I personally have seen you all in work, on duty and pulling over and proactively pulling over trucks and taking them to the inspection stations. So I think it works. I think that, you know, folks in Jordan and the east end of Vineland, you know, they notice trucks when the scales are open. And if we can avoid, you know, similar to what Councillor Russell was saying, like they're willing to drive all over to avoid that scale if they have to, save themselves a half an hour, spend an extra half an hour to save themselves a half a day or a full day, and all the fines that come with it. I think that any chance we can get to pull these, you know, these bad actors off the road, I think is critical. And even just having a presence pulled over on the side of the road, you know, looking for or, you know, seeking out, that presence is noted and appreciated in the community. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Councillor Patry, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Brunei, and thank you very much for attending. And I know Director Graham has arranged the tours, and I haven't been able to do it, but I'm looking forward to coming down and seeing it firsthand. These numbers, guys, they're staggering. Like, and I know the blitzes are a heck of a lot of extra work for you, but I mean, you know, you do 31 comprehensive inspections, and you take 16 plates off. Like, that's frightening from someone that, I mean, I put about 65,000 kilometers on my vehicle a year driving around the province, and I want to know that the guy beside me, his brakes work, his tires are inflated, his load's not going to shift, especially on the Skyway. Like, what are your personal anecdotes to this? Are you happy? I guess I wouldn't say happy with the results. In a way, yes, but in a way, no. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what do you?
Yeah. So Ontario, with the exception of the District of Columbia, has the safest roads in North America, and that's large in part due to the enforcement action that we take, the policing partners take. So when we find these trucks, we're not surprised. We're happy to deal with them when we find them, but we know year after year this happens. Happens more when there's recession looming. People put their money elsewhere besides maintenance, but we're always out there each day, and but we're a limited amount of resource, right? So we try to target, and these cameras allow us to target the trucks we want to target.
Okay, terrific. And are these new offenders each time, or are there your repeat scofflaws that, you know, like companies that, like you say, don't invest in maintenance?
So a lot of it's repeat. I mean, what your cameras allow us to do is it gives us the plate number. We can run that plate number in our cruisers if we're on the side of the road monitoring, or we can run it from the scale if we're monitoring. And it comes up with the CVR status of that vehicle. And basically, the CVR is like a driver's license. It tells us how good that company's doing and or how not good they're doing. So we can use that as a guide of whether we're going to go get that truck or we're going to wait for the next one to come through.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for what you're doing. And to, I think Councilor Russell's question too. I mean, you know, if more cameras make your job easier, then I think we need to look at that. Because I know I'll be up at 20 Valley Golf Course, and I'll see them coming across Bethesda, and I'm taking pictures and I'm sending them to Director Graham going, like, what's up with these cats, right? And you know, Bethesda's not built to withstand heavy truck traffic, so they're kicking the you-know-what out of the road base, costing us money to repair it, and then also skirting your work. So anything else that we can do to help, let us know, please. And thank you for everything you do. I look forward to coming down firsthand and seeing it. Thank you, Chair Brunet.
Mayor Easton, please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't think you could have more fun than I did. Well, needless to say, this is an extremely effective program. I want to thank Niagara Regional Police Officer specifically because I know that West Niagara, you know, there's a target in terms of how many officers we have. So to know that that you are all present, this is like dedicated time, which is impossible to negotiate. So we're really, really happy to have you on site as well. And also, there's a few officers that are from the Lincoln area, and so their knowledge of who's, including gentlemen present tonight, they know who's local and who isn't. And so we know that there's certainly an element of fairness to all of this. But I just want to remind council that as long as we are not able to implement an across the escarpment crossing, this is the best way for us to be in control of our own destiny. And we certainly are aware of the number of hours that are going into this, but the impact on public safety is just, it's just so impactful. I don't know how we would measure it. However, we can certainly measure, I think, how much these fines have added up to. Does anybody just happen to have that number off the top of their head?
I mean, we don't have any statistical data of like how much monetary value has been issued roadside. But typically when you're seeing on those stats, I believe most of you have in front of you, when we're issuing a provincial offenses notice, each one of those is gonna range anywhere between, on the low end, something like $110, but then on the high end of $390. And I would say that the majority of them are in the higher range, within that high 300, that range. But, so if you look at the statistics of how many tickets were issued on those blitz days, it would be fair to give an average between that 110 on the low end, but the majority, I would say, would be on the higher end.
And then on top of that, the Niagara Regional Police, if you're ticketing, what kind of things are you ticketing?
Very similar, through you, Chair, very similar. The tickets would be similar. We have dedicated officers from 8th District that will attend the Blitz days, and then from our traffic unit as well, that are trained in doing the inspections on the trucks. So they lay the same fines, the provincial offenses notices, and then they just lean on the expertise for help when they're doing the inspections. So they're all similar.
And are you in a position to judge, is it I don't know what whether you're an officer or whether you are a senior officer, and so do you have influence over the involvement of the Niagara Regional Police Service in this activity?
So I'm the 8th District Commander. So I approve, usually every Blitz day, I'll hire one officer on overtime. So it's a minimal price that we pay for the extra officer, because the Blitz days are always on, one of our officers is CVSA trained, so he can do the inspections. And the Blitz days are on those days, so he can actually attend while he's working. So yes, so we, through our traffic staff, sergeant and myself, we make arrangements for as many officers as we can to come out and support the initiative.
That's great, and I know that you haven't been here for a long time. Thank you for catching up very quickly on this project. It is extremely important to us. So the provincial offenses then to the staff, Madam Clerk, I believe you're involved in this. So where does this money go? Who gets this money? If it goes to the Provincial Offences Act and the courts, I know where that money goes. But what about the MTO ticketing? Where does that money go? Because maybe that's what we should be looking for purchasing any new equipment or technology.
The same as the Niagara Regional Police service tickets, they'll go through the court and the funds get returned back to the region.
Okay. All right, that's good. Thank you very much. So let me have a quick look. Yes, I was certainly interested in the revenue. All right, well, thank you so much for coming. This is, we can't say enough, and we certainly make a point of reminding whoever the Minister of Transportation is that this is a very, very important project. You know, when my mind is really active, I can think of all other kinds of value that comes out of being able to have that observation. And when you can do that, you can certainly have an impact on who's on the streets and who's coming into the town. Some of the trucks that I see on the weekends are pretty scary, and the license plates are pretty far away. Those trucks from Texas, I can't imagine what they're doing in downtown Beamsville. At any rate, thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. So just as chair, I've had the opportunity to work with Director Graham for a number of years, on my three years, over the last 10 years, and along with, our vice chairs, we've really, and all of the council members since 2014, when a number of us joined and Councillor Patrieva was on it much before that, we have challenged Director Graham with these blitzes and to see where we've come from, doing one a year to 12, working with a number of staff sergeants out of District 8, and every one of you has been supportive. We're talking about Niagara Regional Police and we're talking about the MTO. I think we'd be remiss. I've been down there. I've had the opportunity to be down there a number of times for these blitzes, and I've seen Halton Police there. I've seen Hamilton Police there, and I've seen Niagara Parks Police there. And sometimes we don't have the resources or the equipment to do some of the things that we need to be doing with these trucks. So, having some of that expertise from other areas like Halton, I think has been very beneficial over the years. And, like Councillor Patrieva, I've traveled the roads of the province, and I just spent 7 hours coming back from Windsor, which is supposed to be a 3-hour and 15-minute drive. So we sat on traffic at the first interchange in London because there was a bridge being replaced over the 401. Never moved for 2.5 hours. The amount of trucks I saw in that corridor of the highway on the 401 between Windsor and London was unbelievable. And just to think, when we're looking at, these violations and everything, and, we would be hopeful that the numbers would be decreasing, but the stark reality is the traffic that's on that highway coming from, the U.S., going from Buffalo to Windsor and on beyond, just speaks volumes that we need to continue with this program and continue to make the investments, and we thank you for all your work. Thanks for being here this evening. So there are no further reports for the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee agenda this evening, and we have now concluded the CSI committee agenda, and I will now ask the clerk.
Oh, sorry, we have a motion
Oh, yes,
for the
I
report.
jumped ahead of myself.
That's okay.
We have no further discussion, but we do have a motion moved by Councillor Patrieva that committee receive and file report PW-08-24 regarding the truck bypass camera monitoring pilot project update And I will now ask our diligent clerk to open the vote.
The vote's open. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Regima?
I got kicked out.
Okay.
Hold on, I'm backing out.
Okay, and yours, okay, so you are in.
Okay.
Thank you, and I will close that vote, and that carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So I will now ask our clerk to transition to our next committee agenda.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair Brunei. And before we move on, I think it's a pertinent time, halfway through, hopefully, we'll take a little 5-minute break. Everyone can go to the bathroom or get some water. Thank you. Okay, so we are now at the planning and economic development portion of tonight. Mr. CAO? Thank you. We're now at the planning and economic development portion of tonight's agenda. We have one registered delegation for the Planning and Ec Dev Development Committee this evening. Please note that the delegations have up to 5 minutes to speak. Additionally, committee will consider the associated report once the delegation has been received. Our delegation this evening is Owen Scott from CHC Limited, joining us electronically regarding item 9.2.1, demolition permit for a listed property non-designated on the Heritage Registry, 4924 King Street, Beamsville, PD 3524. Please go ahead, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for allowing me to do this by Zoom rather than fighting the truck traffic on the highway tonight. The staff report for this project really says it all, and I don't have a whole lot more to add to that. To summarize, the property, in my opinion, does not meet the minimum 2 criteria for designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, even though it's a very picturesque property as viewed from the street. Other than the shape of the original building, there's really nothing left of the original fabric. Its picturesque qualities are really the result of modern finishes and embellishments. And it did make a contribution to the King Street streetscape in spite of its many modifications and later embellishments, but it no longer does to that same effect, mainly because the properties on either side have been demolished, a large-scale townhouse development has been built on the high point at the rear, and townhouse developments on either side are undergoing the approval process as we speak. I would be very pleased to answer any questions that you or members of council have at this point.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Scott. Are there any clarifying questions for the delegation? Councillor Brunet, go ahead, please. I don't have the box. I don't have the box, so. Okay, merci beaucoup.
Yes, thank you, Chair Pachariva. Through you to Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott, I'm just wondering if you could tell us for the record who hired you to do the heritage investigation assessment?
I was engaged by the owners, which is the typical way that HIAs are done.
Yeah, thank you very much. So through your professional assessment, you have deemed that you feel there's only one area in criteria that the property meets, is that correct?
There's one criterion that it meets, yes.
Okay. You're aware that we've been engaged with AECOM looking at a heritage conservation district for the last 2 years?
I am, and I've read the study.
Okay. And you've looked at the AECOM report where they deem 3 areas that it meets criteria in their opinion?
Yes, I've read that.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brunet. Councillor Michalak.
Thank you very much, Chair Pachariva, through you to Mr. Scott. I'm just reading Appendix A in the report, drafted by yourself, the executive summary. It says an application for a demolition permit was submitted June 27, 2024 for the property at 4924 King Street in order that a townhouse development can proceed on the property and the adjacent vacant property. Can you explain that to me? Like what is the intention of, what were you meaning by that? I know that there's a development that is slated to the both the east and the west, but which adjacent property are you referring to?
The adjacent property would be the property as you're facing the building to the left of the building.
West or east of?
No, I get confused on directions. The lake is
East, Councillor Michalak.
Okay. So is the demolition of that property required for the construction of that development?
There are two alternative developments that I was shown. One does not require the demolition of the property, and the other one does.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You okay, Director Bruder? Yeah, that, Councillor, that was more of a staff report question, but,
I asked that because he drafted this
okay,
report.
okay. Okay. So, there being no further delegations, I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers. The committee receive and file as information the following delegation regarding the demolition permit for a listed property non-designated on the Heritage Registry, 4924 King Street, PD 35-24, Owen Scott CHC Limited. I will now ask our clerk to open the vote.
Thanks, Chair, and the vote is now open. Councilor Brunet? Support. Thank you. I will close the vote, and that carries. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Julie. So we will now consider report PD 35-24, demolition permit for a listed property non-designated on the Heritage Registry, 4924 King Street, Beamsville. The Director of Planning and Development will provide introductory comments. Mr. Bruder, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to provide a little bit of an overview. As has been alluded to already in some of the commentary, there's been multiple viewpoints for this specific property. Again, kind of showcasing how a process should unfold. It all started with the looking at the Heritage Register. And when you look at the non-designated Heritage Register and you look at properties, or the Heritage Committee looks at properties that should or shouldn't be included, they're looking, broadly speaking, just general characteristics. And in this case, being part of a grouping, resembling some of the character of the area. And then that process was undertaken. Then subsequently, as Councillor Brunet, I think, alluded to, we had undertaken a Heritage Conservation District study, which was completed last year. Also a broad look at the corridor in general. And there were three different components that study identified it as a potentially contributing property, or three characteristics that would lend themselves to heritage significance. Again, mostly related to contextual value pertaining to how it fits in with its surroundings, how it defines the character of the area, a little bit also about the actual house itself and the built form. So now, what that really did, what these two things established, was it provided an opportunity, if there was going to be a demolition permit, which is the subject of today, to look at it in more detail. And as that was done, you heard from the delegation in terms of some of the considerations, and it's also included in the report. But what that unveiled was that this property has been the subject of significant alterations. There's been an addition. Most of the windows now have been replaced with vinyl. The siding's vinyl, which has been replaced. The front entrance has been altered. And on top of that, it's interesting to talk about groupings, because when you look at this particular property, as a matter of fact, all properties stretching from Academy Street eastward to this property, they are all zoned and have been since the previous zoning bylaw that was implemented in 1993, RM3, so residential multiple 3, which provides the most options in terms of redevelopment potential. When you look at this site and the sites adjacent to it, some of that's already being realized, as Mr. Scott alluded to, just in terms of some of the development applications that are currently underway. Specifically with one of those, the townhouse development adjacent to Woodburn Cottages. If council will recall, there was a lot of conversations about character there and some of the character defining elements and how we incorporate those into the facade. I can tell you that going through that exercise, knowing what the key elements are, moving forward for any future redevelopment of this site, there would be very similar principles applied, which is, all this being said, is why staff have arrived at the recommendation they have. There is some commentary in here from our Heritage Committee as well, again, looking at this site in the context of some of the previous evaluations that were undertaken, and definitely valid points, but when we look at it from an overall standpoint, capturing all of these particular elements, again, our recommendation is before you tonight. Thanks very much, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruder. Councillor Brunet.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Bruder. So I'm wondering, Matt, if you could just kind of highlight what the role of the Heritage Advisory Committee is in the municipality of Lincoln.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the role of the Heritage Committee ranges from a variety of things. If we're talking about looking at these non-designated properties, we're looking at providing their input strictly from a heritage standpoint in terms of what they perceive are important characteristics to hone in on, to evaluate, to preserve. They also have all kinds of other elements in terms of plaques and commemorative undertakings. There's a wide range. They developed the triage list in the first place of the non-designated properties to review so that we could ensure a fulsome process was undertaking for these types of lands. So a wide range of those types of things, all through the lens strictly from a heritage point of view.
That's great. Thank you, Matt, for that, and thank you, Chair Pachariva. So just a follow-up question through you, Chair, to Mr. Bruder. So when we look at these type of things, does this, the subject matter we're talking about tonight, would you categorize this as a matter that falls under the Planning Act? Or is this more precisely something that falls purely under the Ontario Heritage Act?
Through you, Mr. Chair, from a standpoint of what process is being undertaken, there's kind of two things. There's Building Code Act implications with the non-designated list, but that non-designated list and the establishment of it is under the Ontario Heritage Act.
Okay, and just for clarification, when we have an advisory heritage committee, is the responsibility of the advisory committee to report to staff, or is it to report to council?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the role of the advisory committee is to advise council, and then obviously staff also provide a report to council, and then council takes all of that input and makes a decision moving forward from staff's recommendation.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brunet. Councillor Rinchema.
Thank you, Chair Pachariva. I have a question. The Heritage Committee has requested that a peer review be done on that HIA that we just heard about. And as Councillor Brunet just clarified, the Heritage Committee is in place to advise staff and council as they have the expertise. So I have one question under that heading. Do we provide a budget for items such as peer reviews when they're requested by that committee? And I have another question after that, too, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll address that one first. We do have an overall consulting budget from which we draw from a range of things, including that for the Heritage Committee.
Okay, thank you. So I'm assuming that's all considered under the terms of reference for the committee. So my other question is, did the committee have an opportunity to review that heritage impact assessment before it came to us? And did they take that into consideration in the comments that were sort of provided in your report?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, they did. They were able to review the report and then provide their commentary, which is included in the report based on that.
Okay, I did look at that, and I don't see, I guess I'm looking for more detail in terms of rebuttal from the committee. I didn't see detail. I saw that the committee feels that, through you, Mr. Chair, the committee feels that the building meets more of the criteria than the heritage impact assessment stated. There's one in about 9 under 3 categories, and they feel that they meet more, but I didn't see any detail. So I'm wondering, that puts me in a little bit of a difficult position to take the advice of the expertise on our heritage committee if I'm not hearing expertise come back to me about a report that they've reviewed. I'm not sure if there's a question in there. I don't think there is. That's a comment. Yeah. And I do have one more question. Maybe I'll throw it in now since I've got the mic. This is for staff, through you, Mr. Chair. How do we ensure that the facades for future development are and continue to capture the feel of the streetscape and heritage? Is that design guidelines, and are they enforceable? How do we know that, let's say this building gets torn down, and then somebody says, okay, I'm gonna develop this, here's my design, looks great, okay, sure. And then nothing happens for whatever reason, because we know the economy, whatever. Let's say 6 years from now, 7 years from now, everybody at the town is changed over. You know, who knows what happens in the future? Nobody has a crystal ball. How do we ensure that we are enforcing, or how do we ensure in the future that those developments meet those requirements that we're putting out in terms of facade and meeting the streetscape and the heritage feel?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, we can look at it in a couple of ways. First of all, in the short term, as I mentioned, we've gone through an exercise that would pertain to the same character-defining elements for here with the Woodburn Cottage, the proposed townhouses. We would implement the same practices here in the short term. In the longer term, we also have general design principles and features that are included in the work to date for the Heritage Conservation District. Those would inform any potential redevelopment as well. Just looking at some of the key features and what would need to be emulated in the future. So we have a couple of tools available.
So, as a clarification, Mr. Chair, the proposed future Heritage Conservation District would have policies in it that people need to review and need to adhere to for future development. What about this particular development? Would there be anything in the zoning bylaw if they have to rezone? I don't know if they do or would or not, but if they did, would we put anything in there that has to do with the facade, the heritage? Can we do that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would look at this property as well as all of them in the corridor, but in terms of rezoning, like I said, they've already got some pretty wide open residential zoning, RM3. So depending on what they would want to do moving forward, but, you know, I would say that there would still be an opportunity. Again, it would probably be a lot of the policies and guidelines that come out of the future HCD study that would guide it in the future. But in the short term, again, because we have already, you know, a similar type situation, albeit not quite the same, but we would employ those principles that were contributing to that final design. And if you recall, we did that, or we identified some of that through the zoning amendment process for those townhouses as well.
Through zoning.
Mm-hmm.
So one more clarification question, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, on that. So site plan, there's no tools within the site plan process, and there may not even be a site plan. If there is, are there any tools in there that allow us to enforce the heritage principles and facade, et cetera?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think enforce is a little bit of a harsh word, but again, you know, you're aware of all the implications now that have happened because of recent legislation as it pertains to site plans. It is a little more difficult to actually enforce that, but I can tell you, just through working relationships and the back and forth, and to be honest with you, some of the marketability and the willingness to create a successful project from the applicant's side, we've been able to influence design in the past, even though it might not be something we can actually regulate.
I know you have, so thank you. That's it, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Renchenbach. Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Chair Pachariva. If you will indulge me to make a few comments. Thank you. So the emergency meeting was held at the Heritage Committee on August 22nd. That was already halfway through the 60-day. There was no time at that meeting to have another peer assessment completed because the clock was ticking on the 60 days. So, you know, at the meeting on August 22nd, we were told it's coming to Committee of the Whole September 9th, and then to Council on September 23rd. So time was very limited. And I also want to answer a few questions from Councillor Rajima with my comments. The committee feels that this property meets more than one criteria under the Ontario Heritage Act. It believes that it meets 3. And I also want to comment that we have some very highly skilled people on that committee. We have historians, we have researchers, we have a heritage planner. These are people with high level experience and skills. The committee believes that the criteria that it meets are numbers 7, 8, and 5, which clearly align with the AECOM report. The AECOM report also believed that the property meets criteria numbers 1, 7, and 8. So the 7 and 8 both align, and they had also said 3 that meets 3 levels of criteria. So the committee would like to recommend that council issue a notice of intention to designate this property. Some of the comments that were made in the report that came from the consultant where the streetscape is no longer existing. The supporting properties have been removed. I still feel there is supporting properties across from this property, as well as Woodburn Cottage, which is their direct neighbor. The idea that this property would be commemorated on a plaque at Woodburn Cottage also makes me question, why would we be commemorating this property if it has no viable historical features? Designating and incorporating buildings into a development is possible, and it happens. And I think that's where we could maybe put our focus, is with the developer to incorporate this property, to keep this historical building, which is a cottage built around 1840. And I think it could happen just as in Prudhome's with the barn and the house. That was something that we worked with. And I just want to put those comments out, and I thank you very much, Councillor Pachariva, for allowing me to make those comments.
Thank you, Councillor Timmers. Mr. Bruder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to address a couple of the points. All good points, Councillor Timmers. But I think, when you're looking at those criteria that, both the AECOM report and Heritage Committee thought that it was meeting in terms of, those were a lot of contextual points of view, looking at character, looking at how this particular house is related to its surroundings. I won't disagree with you about, the surroundings could mean not necessarily the properties right beside that have been, or to the south that have been redeveloped. That's fair. But I think generally speaking, what I am trying to say is the actual elements of the house itself in terms of, looking at its original structure, looking at, its makeup, its materials, what it represents. The point is that's not really there now. So the point is, and where staff were coming from was, if there is going to be redevelopment in the future, and you have to think there probably would be, although there's no developer confirmed right now, but there will be. Otherwise, why demolish the house? You can incorporate some of those key themes that may be contextual, but not necessarily meriting designation in of themselves into a future design. So that was where we were coming from with that.
Thank you, Director Bruder. Councillor Michalak.
Thank you very much, Chair Pachariva. Through you to staff. So I go back to the executive summary by the consultant, and and it says there, that in order that a townhouse development can proceed on the property and the adjacent vacant property, that's why this demolition permit is in place. When we were looking at those developments back in the day to the east or to the west, do we ever consider the neighboring property and its heritage significance, if there is any heritage significance? Should we have?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did, just because of, generally speaking, when you look at the non-designated register and it talks about a grouping, that was a factor. But again, looking at specific to Woodburn, there was an opportunity. A lot of the character defining features on that property were specific to the cottage. So in that case, there was allowed a redevelopment of the townhouses. I know you're referencing that executive summary, and there have been conversations about that Woodburn Cottage. Maybe if this application were to go through, there could be integration into that. But again, it's not confirmed, and it's all based on these conversations. I think instead, what we have to focus on is where we're at now and the actual relation for this house in terms of what it actually offers from a heritage perspective, and looking at the landscape around it. I think that's the key tenet here. But I know there was some confusion in that wording of the report. Right now, as it is, the Woodburn Townhouse project could just proceed on its own the way it has. It's far along in the site plan process. It could go that way quite easily. But if there's an opportunity here, if there's been conversations with the applicants for this demo permit and that developer, then that's something that could be explored. But it's obviously nowhere near being anything tangible because we're in front of you today for consideration.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification, because this report makes it seem, or when I read this executive summary, it makes it seem like that development cannot move forward without demolishing this house, but you've clarified that. When you talk about character and design, and we were looking at those developments, the FBH one and the other one next to it as well, like, when we look at character and design, was this house like considered when we were looking at character and design and trying to have those developments to the east or west kind of flow with this sort of character and design that this yellow house that we're considering tonight?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think we went into that level of detail with consideration. But again, looking at this area as a whole, there was always, I think staff always realized there was always going to be some potential redevelopment interest here, just by virtue of the applicable land use that's been in place there for 30 years now, plus. So, I think there's been a little bit of conflicting initiatives here, but I think the point was, even though yeah, there's redevelopment potential, but then the non-designated list identifies it. I think it's meant to just go through an additional lens, which we've done, and we've concluded that this house, it might have some appeal to offer to the surroundings, but from a heritage designation standpoint, the opinion is that due to all the alteration, it's not appropriate to be designated. But in terms of design connectivity for future development, of course, that's something that we would consider.
Okay, and then one more question, if I may, for now. The 60 days seems like a pretty tight turnaround time to consider this from start to finish. What happens if we pass that 60 days? What are the consequences of not coming up with a decision within 60 days, saying that, we consider a peer review? Does that suspend that time clock? Or is it still moving? And sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, once the 60 days is passed, then there's actually a time limit under the building code for when you have to issue a demolition permit. And without this 60-day period, that gives us what is stated to be ample time, even though it is tight, I agree with you. After that, you have 10 days to issue the demolition permit. And if you refuse it, you have to have specific reasons under the building code as to why not. Or you move forward right away with notice of intention to designate and go through that process. Those are the options. If the staff recommendation isn't supported today.
Wow, okay. That seems like not a lot of time to consider something of this nature, especially when we're at least 30 days in already, from what I'm gathering. But anyways, okay, those are my comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michalak. Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. When the property on the west side, the old Thomas House, when that was reviewed by the minister, we believed that it would be designated. It had strong characteristics as a craftsman constructed dwelling. However, and we were quite disappointed when they said no, that it did not have the characteristics that they were looking for. And so, inasmuch as this building itself has always been there ever since I can remember, but it was much smaller. It really, like so many buildings, just doesn't have the abilities to survive because it doesn't meet the criteria. So the peer review there's just no time for such a thing. However, through you, Mr. Chair, how long would it take us to have a provincial review? And is there any flexibility at all on the timing, or does the building code jump in at the appointed time and there's no more choices available to us? Mr. Bruder, I guess, would have that question, have that answer.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. The province, again, this is Ontario, at the end of the day, the building code is applicable law. So this is just a measure afforded to us under this 60 days under the Ontario Heritage Act to consider these things. A provincial review, or even any type of peer review, usually would take at least a couple of months to put together. Consultants typically have a backlog, so it's very difficult. I think moving forward, there could be opportunities to be strategic if we hear of things before it actually happens. But again, once you get the actual heritage impact assessment, and then you turn it around and you say, okay, we need it peer reviewed because of X, Y, and Z, and then the peer reviewer takes it, they have to digest it, and then they have to do their own work to validate or invalidate what the report says. It can be, it's a months-long process, multiple months. So, but to answer your other question, yeah, building code is applicable law in this case.
All right, so we're not in the business of looking for having reviews done until we get the answer that we want. I don't believe we are. And so there's a few things that we can do, and one of them really relates to the R3 zoning and ensuring that whatever the applications are that come forward, get a fairly strong message, given that there's a precedent that will be set here. Because as I said to you earlier, every building that's either on the list or isn't on the list could be the subject. All it takes is one real estate sign. And any one of those houses west of Ontario Street could be the subject of a tear down. And we're certainly not interested in that, but we also can't control the heritage criteria. So, once again, we just seem to be always on the short end of the timing. And I don't know whether in your review of this or not, that there was a way that that could have been prevented. I have some very, very fond memories of this house, but when it comes down to the history of the house and the criteria, they don't mean anything. Miss Sneur was a delightful lady, very, very tiny. She would come out at the end of every day with humbugs in her pockets. This is the significance to me of this house. Not the dwelling itself, not the historical criteria, but the fact that she would pay attention to children in grade 5 and grade 6 and come and have a conversation with you. And, you know, but it didn't look like this. It's a big, much bigger building now. So I'm rambling on because I hate to see this lost, but we are already behind the 8 ball on this. And so my only hope, Mr. Chairman, is that we will have the ability, and I don't know what reassurances you can give us or what that means in terms of putting things in writing. How can we ensure that the look and feel of those 3 properties will be compatible with what is there now, that won't be there possibly, and the way the house at the Burns Cottage has been constructed? What can you do to give us some guarantee that that can be a strong and forceful message?
Through you, Mr. Chair, well, I think first of all, I've heard it loud and clear what that priority would be under that circumstance. So I think, you know, what I can say to you with a guarantee is that that will be staff's goal as we go through whatever development process there is. Again, you know, if you're looking for me to point to some particular provincial policy or rule or somewhere, I don't think we're going to find that for this, but I can tell you just based on how we work through development applications, and again, the priority that everyone that's made comments has made this today is something that staff are going to be heavy on when there is a design process for this site.
Okay, and just lastly, Mr. Chairman, the property to the west, is there anything active happening there at all?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that site has been the home of multiple iterations of a potential apartment building. Again, trying to incorporate similar values that we've been talking about, that we talked about with the Woodburn Towns, but there is nothing imminent. It has changed hands a couple of times. And we're no further ahead than we were before. With the original owner, we were at a point where we were close to site plan issuance, but now, it's, to be honest with you, it's gone pretty silent.
Right. Okay, well, that's too bad, because if you were dealing with the same person for all three properties, that would be quite a different matter, I'm sure. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Bruder.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A comment, a little bit of some backstory. So I think what's missing from the reports is the human story behind this transaction. The young family that purchased this home, they purchased it prior to the home, or the approval on the east side from FBH, which was done on February the 1st of 2021. The family took ownership or took possession on March 1st of 2021, so it was after we had already done the approval for it. The intent originally was for them this to be their family home, and since then, again, council has approved a development to go to their east side and wrap around behind them, and then also an approval on the west side, which is going to directly butt to their property. And not only has it limited their ability to any potential resale privately, but the stress that this would put on this young family over the course between February 21st to now, of having that development ensconce them, just like if anybody's seen the show Up, where it's a cartoon from Disney. Again, it's all development going around a small house. And again, the impact that that has on that family. I think right now we're missing something here, that we have an opportunity to absorb this property into one of the developments on either side. I believe they have an agreement with FBH, that it can then get brought into that development. And again, the family can, even though they wanted this to be their long-term family home, they can at least make themselves whole and move on. They, again, from what I understand, they love Lincoln. They are very happy when they originally purchased it to be their long-term home. And the decisions of council and the developments around them have, again, changed that. And I think, again, forgetting that and looking at just this from a paper point of view, I think it's a mistake. And I think we need to make sure that we are looking at this holistically. And I think to the mayor's point, and to Matt's point, if there's nothing overtly historic about the home itself, I think we do have an opportunity to absorb it into one of those developments and make the area consistent.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Bernay.
So through you, Chair, I appreciate Councillor Russell's comments there. And he's quite accurate. The homeowner had an opportunity to come to our Heritage Advisory Committee meeting and did articulate, when they bought this property in 2021, it was to be their forever home. They had no idea that the Thomas House was going to be developed or knocked down. They didn't know that FBH was going to build the townhouses behind, and they feel like they no longer want to raise their family. So those are all accurate comments. So my question, and where I'm struggling with, is where's the responsibility of this council? We have asked our staff to look at a heritage conservation district, and we've been waiting for 2 years for this to come back. I don't know when it's coming back, and I don't know what that's going to tell us. But as long as we, to Mayor Easton's comments, as long as we continue to turn a blind eye to what's happening here, there is nothing to prevent these for sale signs to be popping up and demolition permits being coming to town hall like Kraft Dinner. So where is our responsibility? If we really care about preservation and conservation, when do we step up to the plate and demonstrate to the development community that we are willing to be partners with the development community to ensure that when an application comes in front of us, that we ensure that conservation and preservation can be something that we can integrate into that development. No different than, as Councillor Timmers clearly indicated, when FBH bought Prudhome's, they indicated, the late Mr. Fraccione over and over and over again indicated that he would do everything in his power to preserve that house and do anything in his power to preserve that barn. I do not see why this is any different. If that family wants to sell this property and a developer, whether it's FBH or whoever it is, wants to buy that property and allow that family to be out of the ownership, that's wonderful. But then why cannot we not empower our staff to ensure, the same as we're doing at the BDSS site, where we are going to tear down with a wrecking ball part of that building, there is no doubt in my mind, but we're going to preserve the front facade of those columns that have been heritagely designated. So we have an opportunity to do something here. It's easy to say, you know what, it meets one criteria, and let's just let this demolition permit, go forward. The advisory committee, in the minutes of August 22nd, as Councillor Timmers indicated, is asking for 4 bullet points. I'm hearing tonight we don't have time for the peer assessment. Committee would like to recommend that council issue a notice of intention to designate. That would allow us, as we move forward with this, to work with the potential developer to ensure that whatever we can do, we can incorporate something in that house so that when people are driving by, we continue to talk about, we're going to hear tonight about tourism and how we need to continue to bring tourists to this. Like, it's not just about wineries. People want to drive through this community and see our historic churches and some of these buildings. But if we continue to demolish them, I don't even know why we have a heritage committee and why we're even spending another dime on a heritage conservation district. It's time to put our money where our mouth is. And I thought this committee, this council, was willing to make sure that heritage was an important and integral part of our community. I would just like, through you, Chair, I would like to ask Mr. Bruder, just for the benefit of council members that maybe, don't understand the dynamics. I'm just wondering if through you, Chair, if Mr. Bruder could just comment, within the town of Lincoln, where does the responsibility of the research and the evaluation of our historic properties, and where does that lie? Does that lie with staff, or does that responsibility fall on the committee members of the Heritage Advisory Committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a pretty difficult question to answer because there's a lot of factors that play into it. Normally speaking, if you have the resources in place, it would be a staff exercise. In this scenario, we don't have any professional heritage planners on our staff right now. So, looking at options, there was an opportunity to work with the committee doing some research, us working with a consultant to then take that across the finish line for designation reports. So, I think ultimately the responsibility of coordinating these things does lie with staff, but again, given what we would need in terms of resources, we're talking about a heritage register, a non-designated register it's got a lot of properties on it, over 250 properties, right? So there's a lot of work to be done. So the responsibility, yes, with staff, but again, trying to work with the resources that we have. I think too, I understand the comments, but looking at it from a standpoint of the process that's been undertaken. As I mentioned in my opening comments, we've looked at this through a few different lenses, and we've had, I think I'm hearing that, there's a disagreement with the findings of the Heritage Impact Assessment that was undertaken, which is fine, but again, that's part of the process. Things have unfolded the way they have. We're not just throwing up our hands and saying staff are fine with demolishing it. It had to go through a process to get here, which it did. And I would also say, I don't think we're in the business of just demolishing properties all over the place. I can think maybe of a few other times. I think we're looking at this little isolated area too, which I understand because, again, as I mentioned, there's been conflicting redevelopment zoning that's in there as well. So I get the comments, but I just wanted to provide a little bit of insight in that regard too. Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate those comments, Chair, through you to Mr. Bruder. I would also like to enforce to this council, and I think Councillor Timmers, who's been a long, sitting member of the Heritage Committee, can probably agree with me that the current makeup of this advisory committee has some very, very, very talented people. And these are people that not only live in the community, but do this type of work for a living. We have a gentleman on the committee that works for the city of Hamilton. Heritage, that's what he does. That's his full-time job. Scott Foster, instrumental in doing research across the community. We're going to go to Balls Falls for Thanksgiving. All that work, the hard work of Chair Foster. and Michael Seaman, who's a designated professional planner. So, I just want to reinforce that, this recommendation that's coming from the Heritage Committee is not just a knee-jerk reaction. This was given with a lot of thought, a lot of deep thought, and a lot of commitment to what they want this community to be moving forward when it comes to heritage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bernay. Councillor Michalak.
Thank you very much. Through you to Matt Bruder, you're talking about working with developers or, about character and fit and design. Really, at the end of the day, we can't enforce that if we have no heritage conservation district designation in this area. If a developer moves forward or proposes a plan to their desire, unless there's some zoning issues or some, as far as fit, we would just lose an appeal with the OMB, would we not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think it would ever get there. I could give you plenty of examples of developments that are at various stages of the approval process. I'll give you one. There's one at the corner of Ontario and Green Lane. We've gone through a design charrette with them. Did they need to do that? No, they didn't. So there's ways that staff find, I know where you're going, and you're right, we don't have any strict enforcement tool that thou must do X and thou must do Y. But again, we've had a lot of success in working with a wide range of developers on a wide range of design concepts. We also have our Ontario Street Visioning and Master Plan Study. It doesn't address King Street per se, but it's a good litmus too, because it does address the transition component there where it connects. So we do have some policies there as well that we can draw on. Again, no silver bullet, if you will, but there are a lot of tools that help us get our point across when we're dealing with developers. So unfortunately, no rules, but yes, we've been successful in working with what we have.
Thank you very much. And I understand that, but that's typically when developers are asking for variances and asking for concessions and asking for, that sort of assistance. But if there's a site plan, if there's a plan of, redevelopment where there's no need for committee of adjustment or no need, they could build theoretically whatever they choose to whatever design they would like. That's where I want to make sure that we're all aware of.
Through you, Mr. Chair, theoretically, but again, some of these examples I provided have happened exactly that during the site plan process, because some of your design considerations also, from a technical perspective, inform that as well, so.
Okay. Another question, if I may, through you, is should we have acted quicker with the heritage designation? I feel like the property owners, I feel like future property owners or purchasers, there's a bit of instability or a little bit of uncertainty as to what really is going on in this area the longer this moves forward. Like, I don't know, would I buy a property in this area not knowing what exactly is going on here? And whether or not I could do something or not with my property? Like, is the longer this goes on creating an instability or uncertainty in the marketplace for this area?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think that would be an issue, no. But when you're talking about, should we have acted quicker? Perhaps you could clarify for me.
What's a typical heritage conservation district study? How long does this typically take from start to finish?
Through you, Mr. Chair, how long does it start and take, or start and end? For the detailed portion where you're developing all the policies and everything, could take 8 months, could take 6, it's at least that, but there's a cost that goes along with that too. It's not really an off the end of your desk type endeavor. We had committed before that we were going to undertake some consultation with the neighbor, or with the residents in that particular corridor. We're still going to be doing that. We're rolling that out this fall, but in terms of an actual finalization of all the policies and guidelines, that's pretty involved, and it does take a considerable amount of time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michalak. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Councillor Brunet or Councillor Timmers. Not sure if you can give me some insight into this. When was it added to the Municipal Heritage Registry as a non-designated property? Any idea, roughly?
Can I answer him?
You've got a couple, okay, yeah.
No.
There we go.
I can't answer that for you tonight. I would have to go back and look through the reports and the information and meetings. But I wouldn't say recently. It's probably been on there for a number of years. A lot of them have been on for a number of years. But I can't give you an exact date. I'd have to pull the registry document and look at it, which I don't have with me.
Okay,
there
Mr.
we
Bruder,
go.
there we go.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you're asking Counselor when this property would have been added. It was done, I can't remember the exact point in the year, but it was 2020. That's when this was added. Yeah.
So, again, follow up, Mr. Chair. So, again, this kind of goes back to Councillor Mikulic's discussion or questions on timeline. If it was added back in 2020, and that was prior to FBH moving forward with the property to the east of it, what's been the delay between 2020 and today to getting this designated, as far as, or at least bringing it forward to Heritage back then to review it if we knew that there was property development going on either side of it? What was the delay at that point?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, it doesn't, when you include it on the list, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to move forward with designation or even you're going to initiate. What it means is you want to make sure that you've got some additional time, that's 60 days, to subject it to a heritage impact assessment. It's not really about whether or not you want to proceed right away as soon as you add it. And there's other properties too that are even higher in the pecking order as well that are moving forward with review and potential designation, now especially because we have timelines associated with working through the register. At that point, we didn't. So, but yeah, usually how it works is it's the whole heritage impact assessment is actually triggered by a demolition permit application.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Mayor Easton.
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, we need to come to we need to find out pretty quick here what we can do. So, we're 30 days, I bet it's less than that now. Do we still have 30 days? No, we don't. What do we really have?
Dear Mr. Chair, we're at a decision point here. No.
Okay, so the decision, though, this is the part then that is going to be troublesome. We don't have any time left, and so there's no time for a peer review. There's no time to request or to issue an intention to designate, correct? We can ask for it, but there's no time to do it.
No, through you, Mr. Chair, if you were to go through with that and that's committee council's pleasure to issue a notice of intention to designate, you could pass that as a motion, and then you could proceed down that road. But then you'd be refusing the demolition permit, and then with intention to proceed with a notice of intention to designate. So that's effectively what you'd be directing staff to do.
Okay, but when the time is up, the time is up, and the building code kicks in when it kicks in, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is in terms of a decision, but if your decision as a council is to proceed with intention to designate, then that is a process that's allowed to proceed. You don't have to, then the building code, the 10 days for issuance doesn't apply, because effectively you're issuing refusal by making that decision based on your intention to designate. That's reason in of itself under the building code to refuse the demolition.
Okay, so, Madam Clerk, I'd like to put a motion on the table. Thank you very much. And I'm sure that Councillor Timmers is going to be the seconder if it's required.
2 seconds, please, to verify.
And I'm doing this, Mr. Chairman, because since it is not possible, we only have two options. And the option to have the peer review is out of our hands. And so if we have any credibility at all, we need to put an intention to designate on the table, and we'll see where that goes. And we'll see, and if it's passed, we'll see where that goes. And because that is the only thing that I've heard from all the discussion, that is the step that we have to take, regardless of what the outcome is. And Mr. Chairman, I just want to reinforce that I've seen the staff, and we've all seen the staff deal with many, many difficult applications, and I have never had any reason to question their, the way in which they approach it, or the depth and the breadth of the way that they negotiate issues with developers. Some of them, it's just not possible because of the mindset of the individuals, but that is always on the table. And so I just don't want there to be any question in anybody's mind.
To you, Chair, I've got a motion moved by Mayor Easton. I'm going to put it up on the screen just to make sure I've captured Mayor Easton's comments to put forward. So if you can give me a moment, please. Mayor Easton, Chair, if I may read it out. This is a motion moved by Mayor Easton. That's the wrong one. It's not capturing the right one. Give me 1 second. Okay. That committee recommend to refuse demolition and approve to intention to designate property 4924 King Street, Beamsville, and remain on the Municipal Heritage Register in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. That staff be authorized to publish and serve the notice of intention to designate in accordance with the requirements under the Ontario Heritage Act. If no objection is served to the clerk within 30 days of the date of publication of the notice of intention, council shall pass a bylaw designating 4924 King Street, and a copy of the bylaw shall be served on the property owner and Ontario Heritage Trust, and a notice shall be published on the town website. Mayor Easton, does that properly capture what you were intending?
I believe it is pretty straightforward. I don't,
The comments were to refuse the demolition and approve intention to designate.
yeah, I'd be interested in also hearing what Councillor Brunet and Councillor Timmers have to say.
So I'm going to, okay. It's a motion on the floor. So we're talking about this motion, okay?
Councillor, okay, so if there's questions to the motion,
motion,
then
to
that's
this
fine,
amendment,
okay.
yeah.
Councillor Renchema.
First, but I'll go if he's, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is about the motion that was just up on there said that the applicant has 30 days to object. What does the process look like after that? Let's say that they do object. I guess this question's through to Matt Bruder. I mean, we're looking at a property here that we have a HIA from a consultant, an expert, who says that there's 1 out of 9 criteria that are met. Staff have recommended that we issue that we move forward and allow the property to be demolished based on its own expertise and based on its review of that HIA. So what's the next step if the applicant says, I object to this notice of intention to designate? Where does that put us if they object?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, so that's how it goes. If this is committee's pleasure and it goes through council, then yeah, we issue the notice of intention to designate. There is an opportunity for the property owners to appeal that decision. Then it would be a matter before the OLT, similar to a planning application afterwards, if they choose to appeal.
And we would have to demonstrate that we had some sort of really good reason to designate that property. Part of that might be that we have an ongoing heritage conservation district in place. So I guess I'm leaping ahead a little bit, trying to find a defense before it even happens. But up until today, we weren't even thinking about designating it, and now we are. And I guess that's part of the process. The process is give yourself 60 days, and then you look at it, and if you like what you see, then you issue a notice to intention to designate. But what we have before us is a staff recommendation to let it be demolished and an HIA that says it has no value. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. But my questions are answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vanchema. Councillor Mikulak, question to the motion.
Yes.
Go ahead.
How many times have we done this before, where we've issued a notice of intention without the property owner asking? Typically, my understanding is the property owner makes that request to have their property designated. In this case, we are, or am I wrong? Correct me, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm open to answers.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Normally, you're right, Councillor. Usually how it works is, especially lately as we're working through the non-designated properties register, there would be obviously some coordination up front with the property owner. If they're on board, that's obviously the goal. We work with them to try to get on the same page. Sometimes we do initiate those conversations because we're trying to work through a work plan. To go this particular route, I can say hasn't happened, at least while I've been involved with these things.
It's about the same length of time as myself. I'm personally, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable with doing this without having that area being designated as a heritage conservation district. Property owners purchase property, and I'm a little uncomfortable at this time with that. And I feel terrible that, you know, it's come down to this sort of motion to make things happen, but at the same time, I'm thinking in real time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mikulak. Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Chair Pachariva. In just looking at the motion, it looks good to me, Madam Clerk. Just a little, I just want to speak to the process here. This is what the registry does. We have properties on the registry. When a notice of demolition comes forward, it triggers the 60 days. That is when the Heritage Committee then takes a look at the property. That is when we evaluate the property. This is the process. This is how it happens under the Ontario Heritage Act. The Heritage Committee is recommending that we file a notice to designate. The Heritage Committee's comments align with ACOM's comments in the number of criteria that they believe this property meets. We don't wait for property owners to come to us and ask for designation. It has happened, but this is what happens when there's a demolition permit on the table. This is the process. This is very normal. And in the last time this happened, council approved the demolition. Twice now, they've been approved. We tend to not have enough time to do an assessment on our side, and that's what's happening here. We're only seeing the developer or the owner side. We're not seeing our side having an opportunity to do the research, to do the report, but we do have ACOM, and we do have a very skilled experienced heritage committee, and that was their recommendation. So I am supporting this motion, and thank you, Chair, for allowing my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Timmers. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick, can we have a recorded vote on this, please?
Okay, so Councillor, I'm going to open to the vote, please, if that's okay, and I will open to voting. Thank you. The vote's now open. Mayor Easton, can you please cast your vote? Councillor Bernay, Councillor Pachariva, Councillor Regima?
It's not up.
Okay, now it's coming up.
Just give it a minute. Do you want, okay. It's a recorded vote anyway, it's going to be on the screen. Mayor Easton, did you want to tell me what your vote?
Yes. Confirm.
Councillor Bernay?
Support.
Thank you. And Councillor Pachariva, for some reason? Okay, did you want to tell me what you heard? It's a, no, okay. And that carries 5-3.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
That carries, Madam Mayor, 5-3.
Okay.
Okay.
So, just so you know, Chair Pachariva, that overrides the.
Yeah, so I'm gonna jump forward to the next report, correct?
That's correct. Thank
Okay,
you.
so we will now consider report PD 34-24 regarding short-term accommodation and bed and breakfast licensing bylaw and zoning bylaw amendment recommendation. The Director of Planning and Development and Director of Economic Development and Communications will provide a presentation. Prior to the presentation, I will ask the committee proceed with the majority vote to request an extension for that presentation until completion. A show of hands? Okay, so we're all in favor. Okay, so, I don't need to read Councillor Russell's, oh, I do, right, because we're show of hands. The motion moved by Councillor Russell. The committee extend the presentation time regarding Report PD 34-24, short-term accommodation and bed and breakfast licensing bylaw and zoning bylaw amendment recommendation until completed. Show of hands?
Show of hands, councilors, and that carries.
Okay. Thank you, Matt and Paul. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So good evening, members of council. I appreciate the opportunity to be up here this evening. I know the presentation is shortly coming up, and there it is. So Mr. Bruder and I are here this evening, along with our colleagues and dear friends, Ms. Martin, Mr. Rotz, and Ms. Baslewski, presenting staff's final recommendations on regulating and licensing short-term accommodations and bed and breakfast here in the community, the town of Lincoln. This has been a long, but of course rewarding process, as we've had the ability as staff to learn more about the sector and to meet with our residents and operators on the future of the accommodation sector here in Lincoln. While this process was initiated because of a council motion, staff have met repeatedly to come up with a solution that both supports the industry but also supports our residents and our local economy. We recognize that accommodations in Lincoln help our overall tourism economy and encourage visitors to spend more money in our community because, as we know, those that stay overnight do spend more here in the community. As you see in the report, we have made this program as easy as possible to follow, removing a lot of the requirements that many operators found too onerous. We found that happy medium between the two camps, those that don't want any regulation, and of course those that want maximum regulations. So, why are we here proposing to license and regulate STAs and B&Bs here in the community? So, of course, allowing residents to use their properties for additional income through STAs and B&Bs. This is one thing that we heard consistently throughout our engagement processes and all the communications that we had with our community. We know that some people in the town of Lincoln use this as additional income and it allows them to stay in their homes. In addition, we want to protect the character of the urban areas and consider land use compatibility. We want to allow for the streamlined ability to address potential noise and nuisance impacts. We, of course, as I mentioned, want to support tourism through diversified accommodations. And of course, we want to develop an inventory of all STAs and bed and breakfasts in the community. This supports tourism promotion and, of course, our municipal accommodation tax. We do want to ensure that STAs and B&Bs have the health and safety of guests top of mind through appropriate standards and regulations. And lastly, we want to support long-term rental stock and home ownership in Lincoln. As we know that too many properties becoming accommodations will put pressure on the rental market, negatively impacting our community. So since we were last in front of you, and at the behest of council, staff conducted further stakeholder outreach to listen to concerns, which has resulted in the final recommendations in front of you this evening. In fact, we thank you for asking us to go back and engage some more, as it allowed us to further fine-tune the proposed program that is in front of you this evening. So, since March 2024, we had 2 roundtable sessions held on April 22nd with residents, operators, and stakeholders. So we had 15 individuals attend those sessions. What we heard were concerns related to the application fee. We heard concerns related to the offering of only a 2-year license. We heard concerns related to the inclusion of bed and breakfast as a short-term accommodation. And we heard concerns related to the 180-day rental restriction in the urban area. We did hold a PIC on June 12th. This was in a question and answer format. We had 22 individuals sign the attendance sheet, but anecdotally, we did have some additional individuals in the audience as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bruder, who's going to walk you through some of the changes since we were last in front of you in March.
Okay, so you heard what some of the key concerns were for the latest set of roundtable discussions we had. Go over some of these things here, some of which we implemented after that, some of which we implemented just as a part of this process as a whole and the input we heard. The first one is a new one. It's the one we implemented after those roundtable discussions. It's the removal of the 180-day rental restriction in the urban area. So really that would, the principal residency would remain, but it's a little bit different now. We would be using things like identification, personal identification, mailing, or bills and things like that to determine principal residency and confirm it, attestations as well, but there would be an opportunity for the particular establishments to rent longer than 180 days, provided they meet all our other provisions. This one we did do before our latest roundtable discussions, which was removal of acknowledgement from Niagara Region with respect to private septic system inspectors. Now it's just an attestation. We did change the application fee a little bit. As Mr. Deaney said, we heard some concerns over the cost, and then some wanted perhaps the option of a one-year renewal rather than automatic two-year renewal. We've implemented that. You can see we decreased the two-year license a little bit, and then we also added a one-year license option. Another thing that's been a recent development and a positive one is through dialogue with the Niagara Escarpment Commission. We've gotten to the bottom of it a little bit with respect to their concerns or their stance on short-term accommodations. They're now permitting them as of right in single detached dwellings. That's kind of a new movement for them, a little bit of a movement towards consideration of things like on-farm diversified uses, conversations we've been having with them. But that's a good point of clarification for this process now, because that was also a layer looking at whether or not the Niagara Escarpment Commission would approve it and then having to confirm that. So gotten clarity on that one. And then some of the other items in terms of removal of floor plan requirements, which is included in the fire safety plan, trying to combine some of our plans into one consolidated plan, making it easy for an applicant. And then finally, removal of bed and breakfast as a form of short-term accommodations. We've now defined them on their own. They're still subject to the same licensing requirements, but we did hear that. They just wanted from our understanding, the operators that participated wanted just a little bit of distinction in terms of how they're defined, noting the difference that the proprietor is living there at all times. One good thing to note too, obviously these changes, this is not the be-all and end-all per se. You can see down here in red, we're going to look at things, the application fee being one of them, but other implementation items as well over the next year as the proposed framework unfolds, to see if we need to make further adjustments. So wanting to make sure it's a little bit of a living set of requirements, standards, what have you, so there's room for modification as needed. So now, just boiling it all down, if you look at the list here, I don't think there's too much there that you haven't already seen. We have reduced some of the requirements, as I just mentioned, making it as simple as possible to submit an application. And on that, we've also gone through our online application portal, which is very simple, just a simple application form with fillable items for addresses and things like that, and then opportunities to upload whatever documents are needed. And then also having a two-page checklist, pretty straightforward, just to make sure that everyone can keep track of what the deliverables are and make sure that they've got themselves a complete application moving forward. So this is one of the next two slides, and really this encapsulates where we're at. Just different options here that are before council tonight. Obviously, option A is what we're recommending, which is proceeding with the proposed short-term accommodation and bed and breakfast regulatory framework to address some of the items that we've talked about before pertaining to compatibility in neighborhoods and some of the other things that have been discussed. Some of the benefits, obviously, it helps us track property locations, not just to address nuisance and disturbance complaints, but it also provides an opportunity for us to assist the economic development team has a better directory then to proceed with things like marketing opportunities, supporting the industry like that when they know where they all are. It encourages a responsible tourism practice. There's a general accountability that goes along with a business license. There is now a registry subject to rules, a demerit system, and making sure that all the operators are aligned with what the visions and goals of the system are. So, should committee proceed with option A, we would begin a 6-month educational campaign. We've been talking about this the whole time, hasn't changed, just to make sure there's a little bit of a transition into this, recognizing it's new to the community. And then after that, we would proceed more down the enforcement route, obviously looking for compliance first in education. And then, as I kind of alluded to, licensing, if we move forward with this option, would assist with implementation of the MAT tax, collection and enforcement as well, having that registry, being able to identify where the operators are. Now, option B, obviously not what we're recommending, but this is the other side of things. If committee's pleasure is not to endorse and approve staff's recommendation, then we would be left with where we're at now in terms of addressing nuisance impacts just through bylaw enforcement from a noise perspective. Public nuisance to an extent, there's only so many things that can be considered a public nuisance as we've been through. We wouldn't have the demerit point system or some of the fine structure that actually includes short form wording, so you can issue fines for some of the contraventions right on the spot. We wouldn't have that. We also wouldn't have the benefits of having that registry, that centralized listing of all the operators. And as you can see, there are some negative connotations that come along with that. It'd be harder to collect MAT tax. We would have a harder time enforcing some of the zoning provisions as well, since it's on a complaint-based system. So these are all the things for consideration before you, and that brings us to the end of our presentation, but we'd welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruder and Mr. Deanne. Councillor Timmers.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Matt, for the presentation, and Paul as well. One of the sticking points that continues to come up is the $2 million certificate of insurance. And I don't know if this is just a couple of people or is this is an ongoing theme. Is that something that the owners absolutely must have? Like, we're being told that the platforms that they're on carry insurance that would cover them. So if you could just clarify that for me, thank you.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. There's 2 points when it comes to the insurance. First of all, the 2 million threshold for liability, that's very simple to what we ask for our facilities as well when people rent them or organizations rent them. So there's a matter of consistency there. The other part of it is naming the town as well. And the reason being is because it's our licensing system now. We have a regulatory framework, so as such, we need to be included when it comes to insurance just from a liability perspective as well. So there's those 2 things in tandem with each other and why they are required as a component of this.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Chair, I have a couple of other questions that just came to me this evening and to Councillor Rajima, and I wanted to ask the questions on behalf of the resident, if that's okay. She was not able to be here tonight. Just very simple. She has a lot of advertising that does not have her license number on, and she's concerned about being penalized or fined if some of that's floating around out there. And if you could just answer to that one.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I think that's a good question. It's one that we were made privy to as well before this meeting. I think how we could deal with that is we would just have, or our advice would be to make sure any subsequent ad or marketing materials are dated, just so we have kind of that threshold. Because I do understand it's hard once something's out there to claw it back, and I know there is some of that out there. So that's the solution that we're going to be recommending, is just make sure anything moving forward, should staff's recommendation be supported by council, just date it as such, so then we have that distinction.
Thank you. I kind of suspected that would be the answer, and that makes perfect sense.
Sorry, I pushed on one. And just to add to that, Councillor, we do have that 6-month window of educational period where the documentation can either be replaced, but also on a case-by-case basis. I don't think if it's an old pamphlet or something, we're going to go after and penalize. So I think that resident, that B&B operator is still good to go.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, one final question. The other question was around the licensing fee. You know, say you pay for 2 years and something happened. You had to close your doors due to illness or death, or would they be refunded their licensing fee?
Thank you, Counselor, you know, the fee is really based on the initial license and then the requirement to go through the documentation and such. So at this time, I don't think we'd be recommending a refund opportunity, but as Director Bruder indicated in our presentation, that 1 year mark when we go through and reevaluate the program and the fees and things is something that we can take into consideration.
Great, okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Timmers. Councillor Michalak.
Thank you very much, Chair Patry, through you to Matt and Paul. Thanks for taking the second look at this licensing proposal. Question I have is with regards to what's a guest room? I just booked a guest room, and the guest room I booked is, it's a 1-bedroom suite. So it has, you know, sleeping arrangements in the living room, and it has a bedroom. I also had the option of booking a suite that had 2 bedrooms and a couch in the living room also. So when we talk about max number of guest rooms, is that the guest room of the unit that you're booking, or is that the guest rooms within a suite, or the, like maybe explain that better as far as what is somebody booking?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the guest room's considered the room in which they're booking, which has the sleeping accommodations. But I would also note, when we're talking about guest rooms, we also have a maximum occupancy as well. So that would govern how many people. I think what you're getting at is there's some opportunities in some of these suites. They have multiple bedrooms off to the side, maybe more people within them. In this case, that would still be governed by our occupancy rates. I'd actually turn it over to Ms. Martin if she has anything to add just about the definition.
Thank you, and through you, in the zoning bylaw, we've defined a guest room to mean a room or suite of rooms used or maintained for the accommodation of individuals to whom hospitality is extended for compensation. As Matt indicated, the maximum guest occupancy would also be considered at that time.
Okay, perfect. And then the principal residence issue or concern. Principal resident is defined as where a resident resides most of the time. We're willing to or allowing, thinking that we're going to allow, you know, that principal resident to be rented out more than 180 days. Is that considered to be somebody living in that single-family home or that home most of the time if they're renting it out in its entirety for more than half of the year?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's been kind of a tricky one that we've been navigating through this whole process, the principal residency requirement. In this case now, you're right, we have eased up a little bit on the restriction to the 180 days that it can be rented out, but we still require proof of principal residency. Again, if you're going to go through the process of having your mail go to one location, your driver's license at a specific location, those are the types of things we're going to require to confirm principal residency. So we've moved away from the concept necessarily of, you know, focusing on the exact amount of days. It's rather just making sure that it's still, you know, their primary residence by virtue of all these other things.
Okay, and just to follow up on that response, so when people are renewing their application, are we asking to see that driver's license again? Are we asking to see that documentation again to verify that they are continuing to use that principal residence as their residence?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we are. I mean, we're looking to streamline the renewal process, but that is one thing we'd want to confirm for sure.
I just think that needs to be confirmed, and that can be done through a complaint. If somebody makes a complaint, we can verify that nothing's changed on that. And then, similar to Councillor Timmers, through you, the 2 million insurance, I've heard that same thing, that it makes it a little more challenging to acquire that 2 million insurance, not necessarily the 2 million amount, but when the town is also named on that policy, there's a number. So with that being said, is there an opportunity, should should we hear, should things get difficult, should we not see many people able to, acquire that insurance or, fulfill all this paperwork involved and questions and, answers, how quickly can we, amend this bylaw to navigate through the challenges that might arise?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor. So, I mean, as Director Bruder indicated, we'll be reviewing this process. And if we find out that something isn't working, we'll take a look at it. But on the insurance side, if we're issuing licensing, we have a program, there is a requirement to protect the town from a legal and liability standpoint. Having said that, I did chat with an insurance broker in town today and asked how easy is it to get an insurance and name the town as additionally insured. He indicated that, he sees it in more and more municipalities throughout the province, especially the Niagara region. So he indicated it shouldn't be that difficult, but of course it's on a case-by-case basis when it comes to that individual residence.
Okay. Just as long as we're cognizant of that, if we see that people are struggling trying to obtain that insurance, that we can modify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mikula. Councillor Brunei.
Thank you, Chair. So, like some of the other councillors have commented, I do appreciate the pause that we've taken here and the engagement that we've done with residents. I think for the most part, residents respect that they do have a voice. I really appreciate the fact that, we've listened to those concerns about the removal of the SA. That was something that a lot of people had concerns about, the electrical, certification, the private septic systems and getting the region involved with septic and all those removals, I think are making a little bit more user-friendly from some people. But I guess my question through you, Chair, is when you had the opportunity to talk to some of these, smaller, I'm not concerned about the, I am concerned, let me rephrase that, but, the smaller, bed and breakfast, the ma and pa, that are just doing it because they love the community in which we're in, they're trying to supplement, some income, and they have some serious concerns about the fact that they might have to close the doors, that we're going to force them to put a gone fishing sign on the front door. Is that a concern? Is that a concern you were hearing, or is that a non-issue in your mind?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think it's something we'd ever want to see happen as a result, but I think I can say for the most part, when we went forward with the roundtable discussions, I didn't get a strong sense that was the case. At least that didn't come through to me. I can ask Director Deanny to chime in as well with his observations, but that wasn't, we kind of outlined here, to be honest with you, what the core things were. I didn't hear that. If that is the case with anybody, I would encourage, obviously, through this 1-year review period that they come and talk to us, and maybe there's something we can do to try to help out. But to date, I haven't received feedback like that myself, especially since we were directed to go out and do some more consultation. But
Yeah, I'll jump in as well and echo those comments, Councillor. I think given the changes that we've implemented in the proposed program, I think we've allayed a lot of those fears in terms of having to close our doors. When we held that PIC on June 12th, for the most part, I think it was very positive comments that those that attended did make. They were very appreciative of us going back to do some further consultation. So I think we've addressed the majority of the concerns that we've heard out there. But again, anything can be changed in the sense that when we review, if we see something isn't working, we can always come back to committee.
So through you, Chair, just a follow-up question. So I respect that, and I believe you're sincere in those comments. On the flip side, and I've echoed this, I think for the past year, that I have a concern that we are probably on the flip side, we are going to drive people underground. So, Mr. Bruder, made comments about bylaw enforcement, the AMPS, the administration, all that stuff. So, what is our game plan if we're driving people underground and they're not reporting? What is our plan of attack in those situations if we feel that has occurred?
Thank you. So Chair, through you to the councillor, I'll let Director Bruder refer to or respond to the enforcement side of things, councillor, but I think it behooves us to really identify if we're driving people underground, why is that? What is it in the program that is forcing operators to not register and not self-identify? So I think, previous to my other comment is let's reevaluate. If we identify there's a reason, there's something wrong, then we can reevaluate and correct that. But from an enforcement standpoint, maybe I'll turn it over to Director Bruder.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Chair, just further to that, we did ask for an additional part-time resource, at least to start, something we're going to continue to monitor as well as this unfolds to see exactly how much we need. I think a lot of it is going to happen as a result of feedback we hear. Maybe it's through the community. It's going to be hard to proactively go out and look for these things happening where they shouldn't be. But our game plan would be, again, we have added a resource. But I would also add, I don't know, I know it's a concern and I understand why, but if I look around now, so we'd be the 9th municipality in Niagara alone, notwithstanding other ones we've looked at that are implementing this. Another one too, there's others that are working on it as well as we speak. Ours, I can tell you now, looking at the frameworks of all the others, is certainly not on the stringent or onerous side of the mean. I can tell you that. I can tell you we have, and I hope through all this engagement that we've done, that we've been able to strike the best balance we possibly can. We've gotten a lot of input from the operators that have participated, and we've tried to act on what we heard. So I'm hoping that also helps, feed into a solution.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Chair, I would just like the opportunity to make a comment to our staff. Early this afternoon, I reached out in an email whereby, on the day of a meeting after we've been preparing for this for how long? Over a year. I came across an appendix where there was a proprietor in the town of Lincoln that had sent a letter to the mayor and to council dated June the 10th. I find it somewhat troublesome that letter didn't find its way into a councilor mailbox in the month of June, the month of July, the month of August, and that I read about it for the first time today. I hope we can look in the mirror and look within ourselves as to why that might have happened, and consider that we might be able to do better moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Bernay. Councilor Reimer.
Thank you, Chair Patriva. Thanks, Paul, Matt, and staff for these revisions. I think it was good that we paused. I think that was a beneficial pause. And I really like the clause in here about the 1-year sort of report card and subsequent taking looks at it, because I think it definitely dovetails with the MAT tax. Like, these two are sort of joined at the hip, and so I look at them as a whole, and I do like the fact that we made this less onerous on these on the stakeholders. And just a question, more of an assumption and a comment. The report back, I'm sure, is going to have stats and metrics and numbers and cost recovery, but will we have some stakeholder input, and we'll have some resident feedback, interviews, that type of thing, so not just the numbers, but the people who are, the people who came out to some of the PICs, will we be getting some of their comments and feedback too?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor, and good comment, councillor, and I think, previous to my other comment, when we are doing reviewing and we got to figure out what is working and what isn't, 100% there needs to be engagement with the sector, because they're the ones that are going through this process. So most definitely we'll be doing engagement and providing some of those commentary and feedback back to committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Patriva.
Thank you, Councilor Reimer. Councilor Renschema.
Thank you, Chair Patriva. Thank you for, everybody else said the same thing. Thank you for pausing and going through it and coming up with some changes, because I think everybody's learned a lot, and I think we've captured a lot. First question is a little bit more to what Councillor Reimer just asked. Is the commitment to reviewing the application fee after 1 year based on the premise that it may not be enough, or that it may be too onerous? What's your thoughts on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it is going to consider that too. We've also heard throughout this process that we want it to be, cost recovery, kind of a $0 impact otherwise. So we're going to review it under that lens, but we also do have to take into account what the relevant stakeholders are saying, the feedback they're giving us on that. So I think it's going to be a kind of an amalgam of both perspectives and see where we end up.
I was just wondering what your thoughts are at this point, whether you're thinking, well, I mean, obviously, that fee was, that was what you came up with, so that's what you're expecting it to be, and we'll see what happens moving forward, right? Okay. So, and a little bit further to what Councillor Brunet was saying, if there's an existing operation in an area and they possibly don't meet the zoning as proposed tonight, I assume they are required to secure a license. Will they also be required to rezone, or will they be considered legal non-conforming?
Through you, Mr. Chair, you're talking in terms of one that's already in operation. We would probably have to do a little bit more digging to see how long they've been in operation to make that distinction. And it would depend on where they are. In some cases, there might be permissions already, but we would have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. The word is possibly. That's the answer I would say, depending on some of those factors. They might have to rezone or come forward. Yeah.
But it's a possible option for somebody.
It's possible, yeah.
Possible option, right, thank you. And my other question is, I saw in, I think it was in the zoning, the proposed zoning, that there's an option for signage in the urban area. Is that something that people have asked for? Like, you know, I'm picturing my street, or maybe Councillor Russell's street, with a sign on the front lawn saying Airbnb for rent. Is that what people have asked for? Because my picture is, in my mind, no? Okay, so wondering why that's in there. Is that just something we picked up from somewhere else? Because I would think that would attract a lot of attention as an operator that maybe they don't necessarily want.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, maybe I'll pass that on to Ms. Martin for a response.
Okay.
Sure, thank you, and through you. It's a provision that already exists in our zoning bylaw now, so it was carried forward with no negative feedback from the public.
Okay, sure, thanks. That's it, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Renshma. Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Matt, do we have an existing file that has related complaints in it with the outcome and whether or not there have been recurrences?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have a couple of files for specific properties that I can't name tonight, of course, but we do have some files, yes, about where some things have happened where they shouldn't, what's transpired, and then obviously monitoring after to make sure they don't come back, yes.
So would you judge that the complaints that we have to be very small in number?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Your Worship, you're talking about the complaints to date, the number on this?
Would we have 10 complaints? Would we have 50 complaints?
Through you, Mr. Chair, somewhere between those two numbers, yeah, we wouldn't have 50.
I obviously gave you too much room. Well, Mr. Chairman, I want to reinforce the comments that Mr. Bruder made earlier, because noise complaints are not only very difficult to nail down, and I've seen days and days and days go on with all kinds of testing and different strategies to try and get a handle on what's happening. And so if we choose option B, and it's business as usual, then there really is we don't have any alternative. We have to grind through this complaint in the same manner as we do now, often with no satisfaction to the neighbors. And not everybody here tonight is in favor of this. There are people who have concerns about how it will change their neighborhoods, and we have to be respectful of that. So I just want to make sure that people understand that noise complaints at the moment are extremely difficult to resolve. And the only resolution sometimes may be to remove someone's license. Now, I turn to my colleague, Councillor Brunet, and it's quite possible that people will go underground, but the complaints will continue, and so they don't really go underground. If there's a problem, then it will be known. But I want to thank you for the responsiveness and for the thoroughness that you've all applied to this. And I'm supportive of your recommendation, and I'm hoping that this is going to be very, very successful for everyone.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. Councillor Michalak, wrap us up, please.
The more we talk, the more we discuss, the more I think. My mind is always thinking, so I'm trying. Through you to Matt and Paul, I'm still struggling with that principal residency, that 180 days. And, you know, like when I hear comments about, you know, noise complaints, this and that, like, and I'm thinking about neighborhoods, and I'm thinking about like a house that's rented out for 300 or 365 days a year that is titled as a principal resident, but the principal resident is never there. And, you know, it's one thing to have a neighbor that every now and again throws a party in the backyard, and, you know, there's hooting, hollering, you know, laughing, joking, you know, and just, you know, that sort of thing. But it falls below that 60 decibel, or whatever that number is, enforceable bylaw thing. If we have, or if we observe that a residence that's classified as a principal residence is being used beyond what a reasonable person would be considered to be a principal residence that is occupied by the owner most of the time, do we have the ability to not renew a license? Or can that be challenged?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, you're saying specifically if a principal resident, or one that we've determined to be a principal resident, isn't there, but there's a lot of issues happening on the property?
Well, that it's being occupied as an Airbnb or a short-term rental more than, say, 180 days. I think that would be a lot for a principal residence, my personal home, to be rented out more than 6 months of the year.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, again, that was one of the items that we did hear a little bit about from the operators. It was one that we tried to implement some flexibility with. If there's ongoing concerns, the good thing about this licensing framework is there's swifter measures to deal with them than there's fines, there's demerit points, which could lead to suspensions or revocations. So in a short answer, yes, but dealing with the issues, not necessarily, if they're there for longer than that and there's no issue, again, as long as we have all that documentation for principal residency, that would be, it is what it is. But again, something we can continue to look at too if we're finding issues with it. That's what the monitoring period is for.
Okay, so we can change that in at least a year from now. All right, thank you.
Okay. I see no further questions, and my vice chair isn't here this evening, so I'm going to take a little latitude. I want to thank you both, because when we initially had this, there was a lot of consternation in the community. And we tasked you both to go back and have a second sober thought and work through and meet with operators and sit down, because they're the ones that live this day in, day out. And what's onerous and what's vexatious and what's cumbersome. And you've worked through that, and I appreciate that. And hopefully, the group that was together kind of came to a consensus, you were okay with this. Is that what you got out of it? Okay, and shaking of the head.
For the most part, yes.
Okay. To Councillor Michalak's question about the insurance, Councillor, I did a number of events. $2 million, $5 million, naming the town as a second insured, no issues, ever, not an issue. My question, though, is, and Director Bruder, you made a point of looking for extra resources for bylaw. So, knowing that tourism operates on the weekends, that there will be policies in this hiring that you will be available Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Because there's nothing worse than issues happening with parking, and you know where I'm going, and there's no one there. And people know that. I can park illegally on Sunday because I'm not going to get ticketed. So this is pretty important going forward, that we need to address these concerns, especially in neighborhoods. So looking for that. Give me a reassuring yes.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Director Bruder. You are a beautiful man. Okay, so.
Whoa.
I've got to find my notes here. There we go. Here's the page. So, put the glasses on so I can see. Okay, there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer. Are we okay, or we've got about 5 meetings going on here? Okay, so, that committee receive and file report PD 34-24 regarding short-term accommodation and bed and breakfast licensing bylaw and zoning bylaw amendment. The committee recommend to council the approval of the zoning bylaw amendment attached as Appendix A of Report PD 34-24. And that committee recommend to council the approval of the bylaw attached as Appendix B of Report PD 34-24, being a bylaw to enact a short-term accommodation and bed and breakfast licensing bylaw in the town of Lincoln. And that committee recommend to council the approval of Schedule D of the short-term accommodation and bed and breakfast licensing bylaw in the town of Lincoln. The committee directs staff to implement the short-term accommodation and bed and breakfast licensing bylaw and provide public notification of said implementation within the town of Lincoln. The committee directs staff to approve the addition of the application fee to the 2024 fees and charges. There's a word missing there, but I'm going to say bylaw or bylaw, thank you. The committee directs staff to report back to committee after 1 year of licensing, then on a biannual basis to provide an update of the licensing regime. And that committee declare that they have considered all of the written and oral submissions and agrees with the planning report analysis and recommendations and finds that, subject to the conditions of approval, this application meets the Planning Act criteria, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and complies with the growth plan, the Niagara Regional Official Plan, and the Town Official Plan. I will now ask our clerk to open the vote.
Thanks, Chair. The vote is now open. Mary's done.
I just voted.
Thank you.
I
Close
was
the
out
vote.
again.
And that carries, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We have no confidential items this evening. Do we have any committee remarks? I see none. There being no further business, I call this meeting adjourned at 9:22.